after the presentation, as well as the slide decks. Join our Infront LinkedIn group, Infront University. This will help you stay informed of future events. Tweet and share your feedback at handle Infront Consult. And at the end of each session, there will be a short survey that we would appreciate you filling out and help us make improvements for future university events. Please post your questions in the chat box, and the presenter will do their best to answer these at the end of each session or during the session, whatever they feel comfortable with. Follow-up, we will be following up via email with all of the attendees. As mentioned, releasing the recording and sharing the slide decks. And there will be a draw for a free training seat for any course between now and the end of December. And you can find all of our offerings at the link below. Again, I'll be sharing this afterwards, so you don't have to frantically copy all of this information. We're always hiring. We're always looking for great people who fit our culture. Workforinfront.com, and we are a founder of systemcentercentral.com. It's always a mouthful. A little bit about us. We are leaders in data center virtualization and automation. We do have more than 11 Microsoft MVPs worldwide. They are multiple published authors. We've won multiple Microsoft awards. We speak at events all the time, and we've got a whole bunch of events coming up in November that we will be presenting at. I'll get to that in a second. And you can find our reviews and post reviews on all of our offerings at Microsoft.pinpoint.com, or pinpoint.microsoft.com, I should say. Sorry. What are our offerings? Our core offerings are our software solutions, our in-house management packs, and some management packs from third parties. Training, of course. We do a lot of mock training and a lot of in-front design training as well. And consulting services, our main focus, of course, cloud migration, new deployments, managed services. We have a dedicated data center architect offering. We do patch management, and we've got some new offerings that we're excited to get going and be in alignment with Microsoft. We've got OMS, which is the Operations Management Suite, EMS, which is the Enterprise Mobility Suite, and ASR, which is Azure. That one escapes my mind there. Mickey, can you help me out with that one? ASR?
Oh, which one?
The ASR offer.
Where were you?
I'll get back to that one then. That's okay.
Go back to that one.
Okay, thank you. And we do have our new patch automation or patch management product called OPAS, which is Orchestrated Patch Automation Solution. And, you know, there are a lot of benefits to that. So I'm not going to go through everything right now, but if you are interested, please do contact us. Our management packs, as mentioned, we do have a lot of in-house ones and some third-party ones. We are partners with EMC. We are partners with OpenText. So we are presenting at Enterprise World next month, where we will be releasing our new WriteFax management pack. We do have one right now, but this one will be loaded with a lot of new features. You can pre-register for the free version, a 30-day trial. There will be a link for that I will share with you at the end. And also we've got a free OpenText content server management pack, which you can pre-register for, and again, which will be released on November 11th at Enterprise World, where we will be exhibiting. Our normal free management packs, Active Directory, SCOM, Agent Management Pack, and the Enterprise Virtualization Discovery Management Pack. You can also request those on our website. And we do customizations as well. If you need something different or some features that are not in the ones that we already have right now, we can definitely help you there and do a customized type of consulting engagement. Consulting services, we do have a lot here, but I'm not going to go through them all. We do legacy system migrations right now. Windows Server 2003 migrations are quite popular. We have data center automation and patch management again, very popular and requested offerings, as well as our core services. Training, we have a lot of boot camps for SCOM, SCCM, Orchestrator. We are partners with App Zero, and we do training there, service management, and anything that you want as well, customized, we can help. Upcoming events, we do have our next MP University event, which is an encore presentation, October 28th, and this will basically take care of Europe and the Middle East regions in terms of time, but you can register again if you didn't register the first time. On December 3rd, we will have OMS University. OMS is Operations Management Suite. I will have the registration open for that tomorrow, October 23rd. And as mentioned, we are going to be exhibiting at OpenText Enterprise World, November 10th, 11th, and 12th. Visit us at booth 403, where we will be releasing, like I said, the WriteFax Management Pack and OpenText Content Server Management Pack. Rory McCarr, our CEO, and Justin Hansen, our Senior Product Manager for OPAS, will be there. And then also in November on the 9th, 10th, and 11th, the Midwest Management Summit, Paul Keeley, MVP and Principal Consultant, and Jonathan Almquist, Principal Consultant here, will be presenting. So lots going on. Join our LinkedIn group in Infront University, request our free management packs, Active Directory and Enterprise, and then the pre-registration for WriteFax and OpenText. Please go ahead and do that. Information about training at infrontconsulting.com. And of course, if you are interested in joining this great culture of ours, please send us your resume at careers@infrontconsulting.com. All right, so with that, like I said, I hope everyone can hear me and see my screen. I'm going to pass the control on to Mickey Gousset. And Mickey, like I said, I haven't done justice in introducing you, so please do that for yourself. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Georgia. Good morning, everybody. So let me grab control here from Georgia and start showing my screen. Wait, let me get up what I want you to see before I start showing my screen. And we will, there we go. So, appreciate y'all all coming out to our event today. My name is Mickey Gousset. I'm a Principal Consultant Team Lead here at Infront Consulting. Let me try to get some of this stuff off the screen here. And my primary focus is a lot of Operations Manager, a lot of Service Manager, and a lot of Orchestrator. Now, my background, though, is a developer. I've been a developer for 20-something years. So one of the things that we've started doing at Infront is productizing things as well. And we have our first product called OPAS. And that we have another tool that we've been working on internally that I want to talk to you about today called the System Exception Tool. And it ties into our Automation University because it is designed to help automate some of the compliance issues that you may find in your environment. Now, I'll go ahead and set the stage here a little bit in that this tool is still a work in progress, so it's still a little rough. So I've got some areas where I may do demo, some where I may do screenshots, and as well as we're doing things out of our dev environment, so things may be a little bit, may or may not trigger exactly right. So I'll go ahead and set that stage now. But it is, you know, this is a tool that we're very, very excited about that I see a lot of potential use for clients. But before we get started with the meat of the matter of why you're here, let's see if anybody knows the answer to my question for what Tupelo, Mississippi is famous for. So I am from Tupelo, Mississippi. I'm born and raised in Mississippi, and I've been in Tupelo for a while now. But Tupelo, Mississippi is world famous for something very, very specific. So I'm curious if anybody here knows what Tupelo, Mississippi is famous for. Oh, look at that. All right. We got some answers in the people putting in the questions. So the answer I was looking for was it is indeed the birthplace of Elvis Presley. So Tupelo, Mississippi is about a 25,000 person town, and we get about 100,000 people a year that come through Tupelo just to see the little 2-room house where he was born. And that's not 2 bedrooms, that's 2 rooms. Now, someone else also put out there that honey, that is true. There is an actual song called Tupelo Honey by Van Morrison. And that is also another way that people know Tupelo. But the number one way that most people know Tupelo is that it is the birthplace of Elvis Presley. So now that you've had your Mississippi trivia for the day, let's move on and actually discuss what we're here to talk about, which is what I'm calling the SET tool, or the System Exceptions tool. Now, in my perfect world, we all like to live in our perfect world, but in my perfect world, we're going to be installing, servers and computers and things in our environment exactly where they're supposed to go. So they're going to go in the data center exactly where they're supposed to go. We're going to have a process that gets followed when we're installing these computers. They're going to get installed the exact same way. The process is always going to be followed. We're going to have different agents maybe that need to be installed, like backup agents or virus detection agents or monitoring agents, things like that. And these are things that need to be installed on these computers on every server that we have out there as part of our process. So these things always get installed and always work. And then, of course, we never have any rogue servers or rogue computers that just pop up in our environment that we have to worry about. We don't have departments that go out there and spin up their own machines and put mission-critical applications on their own machines and don't involve IT in those decisions. So this is Mickey's perfect world. And I really wish that the IT world was like my perfect world. However, in reality, what we see is we're still putting servers out there. We're getting in requests to bring up new servers, and we're bringing up new servers and installing those servers. We need to put backup agents on those servers. We need to put virus detection programs on those servers. We need to, put monitoring agents. We need to put patching agents. But in the real world, sometimes all those agents don't get installed, or sometimes those agents get installed, but they don't necessarily work correctly, so they're not talking back to the main server. And in the real world, all the computers and the servers that we bring up into our environment aren't always, the correct process isn't always followed in doing that, in which case sometimes there are departments out there that will bring up their own servers without necessarily involving IT. And the problem with the departments out there that do bring up their own servers without involving IT is those servers don't get these backup agents on them. They don't get these patching agents on them that we need to make sure that the applications that are on those servers are controlled. So unfortunately, this is our real world that we live in, and these are the issues that as IT professionals we're dealing with probably on a daily basis. Now, because of these issues, these things that are happening in the real world, it can lead to missing backups. So it can lead to the fact that we have computers out there that we think are being backed up, but actually are not being backed up. Or we have computers out there that don't even have a backup agent on them because we're not aware that those computers are out there and that they need these agents. Obviously, not having some sort of backup of your mission-critical application can be very detrimental if you suffer some sort of catastrophic loss, such as, say, a tornado tears through your data center. It can lead to unmonitored servers, servers that we aren't monitoring with, say, Operations Manager. So we're not aware when an application starts to have a problem. That's the beauty of Operations Manager, is it can monitor our hardware and monitor our software to tell us when our hardware or our software is starting to have an issue so that we can try to correct it. And if we don't have a SCOM agent on those machines, we're not going to be able to know when the hardware or the software is having a problem. This can lead to not having our servers patched to the latest security patches, which can lead to security flaws, which can lead to ways that people might be able to break into our network and steal data. Obviously, keeping our computers patched with the latest security patches is a very important thing. Security issues and compliance issues. So if you work in healthcare and have to deal with, say, HIPAA, or you work in financial and have to deal with Sarbanes-Oxley, then not having computers that meet your regulatory means and not having computers that follow your process can lead you to getting in trouble with your auditors and your regulators. Now, I've told you about Mickey's perfect world, and I've told you about the real world that we actually live in. So, what if I told you that I could go out and using some of the existing tools that you already have, like say Active Directory, Hyper-V, VMware, SCOM, Config Manager, what if I told you that I could go out and we could find all the machines in your environment? We could find which machines were, say, potentially missing agents, such as a backup agent or a virus detection agent, and we could let you know what machines were missing what agents, or what machines had agents that weren't necessarily functioning correctly. And we could also remediate that by either installing the latest version of the agent or modifying configuration files to try to make that agent start talking back to the main server. And what if I told you that I could do this discovery and this remediation on both the Windows platform and the Linux platform? So I could install agents on both Linux and Windows to try to make sure we're in compliance with what our process should be. Sound interesting? Well, I would like to introduce you to what I informally right now refer to as SET, or what we're calling the Infront System Exception Tool. Now, the goal of this tool is to help identify exceptions in your environment. And what we're calling an exception in your environment is a server or a computer that does not have certain agents on it that you expect it to have. So for example, it identify servers that don't have backup agents on them. Identify servers that don't have McAfee agents on them. So the way this tool works, and I'm going to walk you through some of the details of how this tool works, and you'll see kind of why I'm talking about this tool in our Automation University, because we're doing automation. We're going to automate all of creating this initial report, and we're going to automate remediating any of the agents that need to be installed on certain servers. But in general, the way this tool works is we can go out to Active Directory, and because most organizations are going to be using Active Directory, and we can get a list of all the computers that Active Directory knows about. We can go out to VMware, and we'll get a list of all the computers that VMware knows about, and we'll use this as our base. And then we'll talk to System Center, and we'll say, System Center Operations Manager, what machines do you think you have agents installed on? System Center Configuration Manager, what machines do you think you have agents installed on? We'll go out to Tivoli, to TSM, Storage Manager, and we'll say, hey, Storage Manager, what machines do you think you have agents installed on? And we'll do the same with McAfee EPO. And then we'll take the information and cross-reference all that information together for you in a quick and efficient manner, to where we can then provide you a list of all the computers that are missing an Operations Manager agent, or a Configuration Manager agent, or a TSM agent, or a McAfee agent. We'll provide you that information in a report where you can quickly and easily see, oh, these are the computers that are out of our compliance process right now because they don't have the agents that we expect them to. But on top of just providing you that report, which in and of itself can be very helpful to be aggregating information across these multiple systems, we're also going to be able to say, do you want to fix these systems? And if you say yes, go install the SCOM agent on all of these systems, then we have automation on the back end, which will go out to each of the systems that it finds, whether it's a Windows machine or a Linux machine, and add the SCOM agent to that machine, or add the config manager agent, or add the TSM agent to those different machines. So that's the beauty of this tool. It doesn't just aggregate the data, but it also provides you a means to fix the exceptions that it finds in your environment. Again, using automation to make our life easier. That's the goal of automation, and that's what we're doing. We're using automation to gather this data, and we're using automation to then go and try to fix the problems that are found. So what I want to do over the next 15 minutes or so is just kind of walk you through our thought process of how we built this tool, kind of show you how it works, and then solicit some feedback. Because I'll talk about the kind of feedback I'm looking for once I've finished talking about the tool. So just kind of keep that in mind. But the first thing I want to do is just kind of walk you through this tool and how it works. Now, we're building out this tool to initially to aggregate this information from multiple different systems. Okay, so the first thing we need to do to aggregate this information from multiple different systems is obviously we need to store this information in a back-end database. So we're storing this information in SQL Server. Makes the most sense. It's very easy to spin up a SQL Server database, but then once we have this data and we're going to store it in the database, we need to find a way to push it into the actual database. And that's where we've built what we're calling the dispatcher. Now the reason we went this route is because it made getting the data into the database quick and easy and also scalable. So what the dispatcher does for us is it's a web service. So we've built a web service to help push the data up into our database, and the web service can also do some SQL queries into other databases if we need it to as well. But the idea behind this was we wanted a method that was easy to implement, easy to use in our code, and was also easily scalable, so that if we had a lot of data that we were trying to push up at once, we could even scale this over multiple web servers if we needed to. And so that was our goal. So part of the back end is this SQL Server database and this web service. And while there's not necessarily much to demo there around that, what I will show you is we've built this web service called the Dispatcher. And the way we built this out is it is a Microsoft web service, but we make use of what we're calling these dictionaries. And the dictionaries are actually the main power behind this. We can add in new dictionaries as we try to talk to other environments or other devices, and by just simply making some changes to these XML files, we can easily then start importing data from other systems as well. And that's our goal. We're going to start adding in more systems to this environment to be able to pull data and aggregate data from even more systems as this moves forward. And of course, from a database perspective, we've got our set tool database, which has multiple tables for storing information. Now, one of the things you'll notice when looking at these tables is that obviously we've got things like Configuration Manager, the computers that we pulled from Configuration Manager. But we've also got things that we're tracking like agent versions for Configuration Manager and agent versions for SCOM. So we're looking into the future of this tool where we're also track not just does a computer have Configuration Manager installed on it or does a computer have Operations Manager installed on it, but we're also looking into what versions of the agents are installed, so that we could even run a report that showed you these are all the computers that have agents on them and their different versions, or these are the computers that are out of compliance because they're running old versions, things like that. So we're going ahead and gathering this extra data now, which in this first version of the tool we're not necessarily using, but we're planning on using in future versions, so we can do things at the agent version level as well. So we've got this back end using SQL Server and using a web service. The next step is we need to go out to all these different systems that we care about right now and actually pull that data into our back-end database. So the method we decided to use for this is System Center Orchestrator. Now, Orchestrator is Microsoft's runbook workflow engine for automating things in your data center and for automating multiple systems to work together better in your data center. Orchestrator, think of Orchestrator as Visio on steroids. If you've never seen Orchestrator, essentially you're taking these different icons and dragging and dropping them and linking them together to build out your automation process. Now, one of the things we wanted to do long term was make this a future forward-looking product. So we wanted to use Orchestrator because most people that are using this that have System Center are going to already be using Orchestrator. But we also decided that for most of the heavy lifting that we're going to be doing, we're going to make use of PowerShell. And we're doing that for multiple different reasons. We're using PowerShell because it gives us just a little more control in how we're gathering the data that we care about. But we're also trying to be forward-looking for people that might want to do this using, say, SMA as their automation tool or service management automation. For people that are wanting to use SMA, it would be relatively easy to take the PowerShell that we're using inside of Orchestrator and move that into an SMA workflow as well. So you'll see as we start going through the tool and I start showing you the tool a little bit, you'll start to see that we're using a lot of PowerShell on the back end, and that's why. PowerShell just gave us a little more control over what we're trying to do in this case, and it also allows us to be forward-looking to other platforms that this tool might move to. But again, we're trying to gather this data, and then we're going to push it into our back end. Where are we going to gather this data from? We're going to gather it from Active Directory. So almost everybody probably has an Active Directory, probably multiple domains even. And we can pull data from wherever you want us to in that Active Directory and store it in the back end. We're going to pull this data from System Center Operations Manager and System Center Configuration Manager. So Operations Manager goes out there and monitors what's happening in your environment. Configuration Manager you can use for patching things in your environment, pushing out software. We're going to find out all the computers that have ConfigMan and Operations Manager agents on them. We're going to pull back all the computers that VMware is aware of, and Tivoli, which is backup, and McAfee, which is virus detection. So we go out to all these different systems, we pull this data into our back-end database. We're doing this with, as I mentioned, Orchestrator. So if you start breaking down what's in our system, and of course I'm not going to necessarily show you the secret sauce, but we've got, this is a view into our current runbook structure, which is going to change for the tool, where you can see we've got folders for Active Directory, VMware, SCOM, Config Manager, EPO, and TSM. And then we've got runbooks inside those folders for doing different things. For example, this is our runbook that actually goes out and pulls the Windows agent data from SCOM. So we initially start off with some PowerShell that gets a list of all the computers that SCOM knows about. We pass that information initially up to our web service to populate the database. Our web service returns for us any computers that it didn't previously have information about. And then we go and get some detailed information about those computers. So we're getting information such as the operating system information, agent versions, things like that. And then doing a final update back into our web service. As you can see, we're using mostly PowerShell and web services calls. These web services calls are activities in Orchestrator that we could also replace with PowerShell if we needed to move this to another environment. But with Orchestrator, it works very, very well. And what we found is building this out in Orchestrator also makes it easy to maintain and easy for other people to understand. So we have our back-end database where we store this data. We have our runbooks, multiple runbooks that we set up to say run once a day to import this data and store it in the back end. The next step after that is we actually need to do some analysis on it, right? Our first thing we're trying to do is show you all the computers that are missing different agents. And we, again, elected to go with SQL Server, in this case, reporting services, to be able to generate a report that shows us the exceptions in our environment based off the data that we've created. So here's an example of a report from an environment. And what this report, and this is just the first page of the report, but what this report is showing you is it's showing us that we have a total of 117 computers that are missing SCOM agents. Of those, we pulled 100 computers from Active Directory and we pulled 13 of them from VMware. Here we've got 259 that are missing config-man agents, 113 that are missing EPO virus detection agents, and 154 that are missing TSM backup agents. Now, there are multiple pages to this report which then show you the specific information about the servers that are missing those agents. But this gives us a quick look that allows us to see machines that aren't in compliance. Now, you may have reasons to not have a SCOM agent on certain machines. You may have reasons not to have a config-man agent on certain machines. But for the most part, these are machines that are missing the agents that we require in our environment. And if I bring this over, here's just another example of a report from our test environment. I don't have quite as many computers in our test environment. But you can also see that after this initial page, we start providing details about the computer, such as the computer name, whether it's virtual or not, if it's virtual, what type of virtualization, and what the operating system is. And we do this for, for SCOM, we do this for Config Manager, for EPO, and for TSM. Now, for some of these machines, you see things like not defined. That implies that we actually couldn't hit the machine at the time to pull that information. Now, it could be we couldn't hit the machine because the machine was off. It could be we couldn't hit the machine because there's some kind of firewall or something else blocking us from getting to the machine. But we are trying to gather that particular types of data. So at this point, what we've done for you is we've said, hey, here's all the information from your environment. Here's all the exceptions. That in itself can be very helpful because then you can take that, you could schedule something in, say, Service Manager, create change requests to be able to go out to these systems and remediate those systems manually. But we're all about automation. We're all about trying to automate things in our environment, in which case, why not use Orchestrator to fix these issues as well? We're already using Orchestrator to find them, so let's use Orchestrator to fix them. And that's exactly what we decided to do. So we've also built runbooks using PowerShell, of course, so that we can move these things forward, that will go out and fix issues in these environments. So it will go out and install missing Operations Manager agents on the machines that the set tool found. It will go out and install missing config-man or TSM or McAfee agents on those machines. And it will do this whether that machine's a Windows machine or a Linux machine. So our goal here was to be platform agnostic, so we're trying to make it where regardless of whether it's Windows or Linux, we can install the appropriate agent for you. We're configuring the tool. Right now, the tool's it's got two ways to do this. You could just say go fix it on all of them, or you could say go fix it on a specific machine. We're also going to provide a way in the future to where you could select multiple machines and just fix it on a subset or cherry pick the multiple machines that you want to fix things on. But just because we can, And here's that same exception report that I showed you in a PDF, just showing in reporting services. Now we've got two reports that we provide. One is our exception list, and the other is our remediation results. So if you've gone out and tried to remediate some of the machines, then that information would show up here in our remediation results report. Right now we haven't tried to remediate anything. So just because we can, we'll come out here to the machines that are missing SCOM agents, and we'll kick that runbook off manually. And what this will do is it will get a list of all the SCOM agents that are missing, or it'll get a list from the tool of all the machines that are missing SCOM agents, and we'll go out and try to install SCOM agents on those machines. Now, that will take, that obviously, I've broken that one, so let's try this one. Again, remember, we're in a dev environment. We'll try to remediate the SCCM as well and let that run for a while. But what that's going to do is go out and remediate on all the different machines and then report back to the system exception tool saying, hey, these are all the servers that I was able to install agents on. These are the servers I was not able to install agents on. So it keeps you updated of the progress, so at least you know the machines you could and couldn't remediate on. We're also looking at extending this tool to where for machines that it couldn't remediate on, we automatically open up a ticket in Service Manager and link that ticket to the computer in the CMDB so that you can then start following your process to manually update that server. Now, future enhancements that we're looking at for this particular tool, we're looking at building out an interface. Right now, it's driven mostly through automatically running through Orchestrator, being on a schedule, and then being able to go to the Orchestrator console and kick off runbooks. We're looking at building an interface as well, a web-based interface as well, where people can select to go remediate over all the machines or cherry pick specific machines that they want to remediate. As I mentioned before, we're also looking at tying this back into System Center Service Manager with the ability to create tickets and automatically resolve those tickets once the remediation happens. And we're wanting to look at other third-party systems that customers want to integrate with. Our initial focus right now, TSM, EPO, Operations Manager, and Config Manager. But I'm also wanting to know other systems, third-party systems that clients care about, so we can add in those systems as well. Excuse me, and we can continue to grow this product. Now, I have finished way ahead of time. Sorry about that. But we do have a nice little survey here, which I will ask Georgia if she can copy into the chat window for us.
I just did, Mickey.
So
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a survey where you can provide feedback on this talk as well as the tool, and as well as you're going to have surveys for each of the people that talked today. So please go fill those out. So I'd love for you to go fill out that survey. But with that said, I'll try to answer any feedback that people are looking for, that people may have regarding this tool. So I've got some people asking questions, which is great. So let me see if I can get those questions answered. So the first question is, what are the supported Microsoft operating system versions? So supported Microsoft operating system versions are right now, we're going to support pretty much from at least 2008 onward. I mean, the tools itself is you're going to probably install on Windows Server 2012, just because you can install this on the same machine that you install Orchestrator on. But we're going to be able to go back and pull information from, even if you had 2008 ADs, we'll be able to pull information from those as well. So I have other McAfee functionalities deployed. Can these be added to the set tool? And my answer is yes, they could. I would love for you to go fill out that survey and provide me the details of the other McAfee functions that you have installed that you'd be interested in seeing, so that I can put that on the backlog. So we have another question. We have several 80 domains. What are the authentication requirements to cross domains? So what we do is we set up a different, what we call connector for each domain. So what we would have to do is have a user that has the ability to connect to that domain and pull the data back from that domain. Josh asked, what about Hyper-V Discovery? Hyper-V Discovery is I've got somebody working on that right now, so it's coming. Most of the stuff that you probably have in Hyper-V is probably going to end up in your AD, but that may not always be true. So Hyper-V Discovery is coming where we can rediscover off our Hyper-V hosts. That said, if you're using Virtual Machine Manager, we could also pull that information from there as well. So I've got a question. What are other management products in the marketplace for similar automation, and how is Microsoft System Center Suite advantageous? Well, Steve, you're just like taking me down the path of a whole nother topic necessarily. So, what are the other management products in the marketplace for similar automation, and how is Microsoft System Center Suite advantageous? Trying to think how I want to answer you on that one, Steve. Actually, Steve, what I'm probably going to do is put you off on an answer for that right now, and that would actually be a really good blog post that I think we should write. But here's what we're going to do instead, Steve. Rather than tie up the conference trying to answer that, because actually could get into a detailed conversation. I'm going to take that back, and we will actually send something out to everyone answering that question for you. Does that work for you, Georgia?
That works great. Thank you, Mickey. Fantastic.
And with that,
okay,
I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to give things back to you.
Sounds good.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, Mickey. Great presentation as always. You definitely covered a lot in a short period of time, and thanks for answering the questions. As you can see by the agenda, we've got Luke Swords from Infront, principal consultant, who will be taking control and speaking and presenting about application validation using System Center. So Luke, if you're ready, you can go ahead and take control and get started. We look forward to it.
Thank you, Georgia.
No problem.
Just let me, do we want to wait until for 15 minutes or?
No, you can get started if you're ready.
Okay, right.
That's
okay.
fine.
Okay, just bear with me one moment then.
All right, I can see your screen, Luke.
Okay, right. Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Luke Swords. I'm a product manager here at Infront, and this morning I'm going to be talking to you about our orchestrated patch automation solution, which also incorporates application validation. So essentially, it's a solution that helps with your patching process, but also fills the gaps where in your patching processes today are typically done manually. And so we're using automation to automate those manual steps and allowing for a more successful patching process and achieving greater compliance. So what we're going to cover off today is just a brief overview of patching as it looks today. What are some of the shortcomings? What are the problems we're experiencing today? And how we get around them. We're also then going to look at patching with OPAS and how it's different from our existing solutions on the market today, how it works and how it sort of fills those gaps that we have highlighted before. And then finally, we'll just jump into a demo and we'll actually see OPAS at work. So if we just look at some of the general patching challenges we have today, is that typically patching solutions haven't really changed in the last 10 or 12 years. They don't differentiate between essentially clients or workstations, apart from one very minor change in the reboot scenario within SCCM. They're not application aware. So essentially a patching tool will deploy a list of updates. It installs them at the scheduled time. It will then reboot the box, and then it's done. It doesn't do any sort of determination of something couldn't work, or if there's been a failure, or if another reboot was required. It's not aware of any of that. So it's essentially it's very simple in its process. Install the patches, reboot, done. Also, patching service require a lot of downtime for the applications because the patching tools are not application aware. It doesn't know it's patching an Exchange cluster. It doesn't know it's patching a SQL cluster. If you've got a 3-tiered cluster where you have a SQL backend, an application tier, and a web front end, typically you want to patch those servers in a specific order. So you may want to do the SQL first, and then the application tier, and then the web service. People do those either manually today, or what they may do is split those 3 servers up between different maintenance windows, and each maintenance window may be a couple of hours, and suddenly you've created an outage for 6 hours for your application because you've had to split them all up. Also, or if you're patching an Exchange DAG, one of our clients has a 16-node Exchange DAG. It takes them the best part of a weekend to patch that Exchange DAG, and that is even using some automation where you're moving the maintenance around, or you put in the Exchange nodes into maintenance mode automatically. You're still logging onto the box, still installing the patches, rebooting, repeating the steps. It takes a long time, and applications may be unavailable during that time. Maintenance windows are getting shorter and shorter. It's getting harder now to agree with your business owners that you need 6 hours for patching. They only want availability for a very short time. And if you have a constrained maintenance window, it's sometimes seen as easier to do this manually because I can just log on quickly and do it. I don't have to wait for, as you mentioned before, putting the servers into different maintenance windows. So short maintenance windows is a challenge. And if there's an issue with the patch client itself, we sort of made no checks around that. You may only find out about that when you're running your reports post-patching or on Monday morning and you've seen some failures with the client. And when you look on it, you see that the SCCM health client is not healthy. It hasn't actually received the software update deployments, so your patching wasn't successful. And then lastly, one of the biggest challenges and the biggest time sink, both in time and money, is that when patches are installed and servers reboot, there's no automated way to manually confirm that the application and everything is healthy. You might have an Excel spreadsheet which you run your tests, that's manual. You may have written a script, but that script may only just check one application or one server. Generally, it's not a scalable solution in terms of automatically verifying that your application is healthy. And really, that last step is the real challenge. When you talk to people about where they're spending their time patching, this is where they're spending. This is their 20% that they're spending 80% of their time patching. Your first 80, you can do the auto patch, auto reboot, and that's fine. But that last 20% does take up most of your time. So just in summary, with the current state of patching solutions you have, most organizations do have a patching tool. They may be using WSUS, they may be using SCCM, and they may be using another third-party tool. They have that tool. They do have a regular patch cycle or cadence that they adhere to, so it may be monthly or it may be quarterly. It may be quarterly because it takes too long to patch a server or an application, and so they don't want to impact the business that frequently, so they may push that to a quarterly process. But they then have manual processes to test that the applications and the critical servers that they have in their organization are healthy post-patching. So most organizations don't have an automated way to patch clusters themselves. They don't have an automated way to test for that the SCCM client is failing. They don't have a way of identifying prior to patching that the patching is going to be successful. They also don't have an automated way to gracefully shut down and restart complex applications. You know, some applications may have to be shut down in a very specific order. You shut down these services first, then you shut down that application. You log onto the server, you stop, you know, that particular process running. And similarly, when you need to reverse that scenario, it's just as complex. It has to be run in a very specific manner. And then finally, we don't have an automated way to test that the applications are healthy. So we may have brought the applications back up again, but we haven't then figured out an automated way to make sure it's healthy. This is something that's done manually by the application support team, or perhaps by the server team, and they may send a report on, you know, Sunday evening. I've gone through all the checks, we're healthy, we're good for Monday, but he's typically, or she has done that in a manual way. So let's look at SCCM patching, and then let's look at how we do it with OPAS, and we can see some of the differences. So patching with OPAS, your patches are released, with SCCM, your patches are released on Patch Tuesday, the second Tuesday of each month. Within SCCM, you would create your software update deployments. You would target them towards collections, and you have in them, particularly using maintenance windows, you have them trigger at specific intervals. So the clients receive the deployments, install the patches at their specific time. They then reboot, and then your manual application testing begins. And it's really at this point is where the biggest time sink is, because for those critical applications, you need to make sure that they're healthy. You've brought them down, you've created an outage, and so you need to make sure that now that you've brought them back up again, they're healthy. So SCCM cannot help you there. So the patching, the first two phases, the patch, distribution, and the installation, is fairly easily automated. But the second bit's where we're checking to make sure that our patching is going to be successful, or we can only really do one patch cycle. So if there are dependent patches that need to be installed, or there is a lot of patches that had to be installed, typically if you've got something like 50 patches, SCCM Cloud can't install them all in one go. It does need multiple goes. And your application validation post-reboot is also a manual step. SCCM can't have that. So let's look at how we would do it with using the application validation features of OPAS. The first two steps are still the same. Patches come out on Patch Tuesday. We create our software up deployments. Here we do make a slight difference here. For the clients you're patching via OPAS, you're actually going to put them into a maintenance window set far into the future. So you still target your software up deployments as you would normally do for all the other servers, but with a maintenance window set far into the future, you're ensuring that SCCM never triggers those deployments. OPAS will do all the triggering and take over from there. So within OPAS, we have our own scheduler built in. It'll then, once that schedule rolls around, it'll then start the patching process. And the first thing it does, it runs a whole series of pre-patch checks. It's going to check some core services, so WMI, Windows Update, the RPC services. It's going to look at the SCCM client. It's healthy if the service is running. It's then going to start sending notifications to the application owners to say, your application is now ready to be patched via OPAS. Just let you know this is happening. It's then going to check for disk space. So by default, we're going to check to make sure there is 2 gig of space free. That is configurable as well. So you want to make sure that there is sufficient space to install your patches. If we're patching a Windows failover cluster, whether it's excuse me, an Exchange DAG or a SQL box, we're going to perform some checks on the cluster itself to make sure the cluster's healthy. We're going to make sure we can achieve quorum or maintain quorum by moving the resources around and making sure there is availability in the cluster. And there are sufficient healthy nodes within the cluster that we can take some of them. We can put some of them into maintenance mode. We're also going to check if there are actual available patches. So we're not going to go through this whole process of rebooting boxes if they don't actually need patches themselves. So if there are patches available, we'll then automatically put the server into maintenance mode within SCOM. And then the next step then is that we actually check for a pending reboot on the box itself. So if the box has a pending reboot, you may be able to install some patches, but at some point it's going to want to reboot. You'll install again, it's probably want to install more patches. So if we can remove that pending reboot immediately, then what that helps with is, obviously it helps with a more successful patching installation. But if there's been previous patch failures, sometimes a reboot and a retry of those patches will help with a successful installation. So we also check for that. And then finally, we run our pre-patch validation checks, and we'll look at those in a bit more detail when we look into the demo. But these are your own configurable checks that you want to run. These could be checking for services, running your own PowerShell scripts, and creating snapshots. Excuse me. So these are the pre-patch checks that will happen out of the box automatically. All of those, apart from the last one, will happen every time. So once OPAS sees that there's patches available, it's run its pre-patch checks. Okay, it's good. It doesn't actually talk directly to SCCM, the management point of the primary site server. What it then does is interact directly with the SCCM client, and it'll then initiate the installation of the patches. Once those patches have been installed, so it's monitoring this as these patches are installing, it's looking to see if there's been failures, it's going to act if there are failures. If there are no failures, it continues through. And if the box needs a reboot, it'll then initiate the reboot. During the reboot, it's monitoring the server the entire time. It's waiting for the box to come back up again. Once the box comes back up again, it's then going to check to make sure that the SCCM service is available. Once the SCCM service is up, it's then going to initiate another patch evaluation. So if there are still remaining patches, it's then going to install them again, and then it'll repeat this process until it's compliant. So this is really one of the key features. If you're patching a highly critical system, you want to make sure it's fully compliant when you resume all the services on it. So by running through those checks in additional time, you'll see much greater compliance. So again, if it needs further reboot, it'll initiate that reboot, again monitoring the whole time. If the box hasn't come back after a certain period of time, it'll flag it to say there's an issue, and a notification will go out. At that point, then we can begin our automated application testing as well. So once our server is back up again, we then check to make sure it's healthy. So this, as we mentioned before, is where we've seen where we've seen problems in the past. This is the time-consuming and costly part. So all those phases that you see, apart from the first two, are now managed completely via OPAS. We don't need to do anything more in SCCM. It is all automated and can be 100% automated. So when we're talking about patch automation, really automation in general, it's not really specific about patching itself. We're looking at three main pillars. We're looking at people, process, and technology. With automation, on the people side of things, we're eliminating human error. This is your main driver for automation, amongst many other things. We're eliminating human error by automating those tasks. Because we're eliminating human error, we're taking the human out of it, we can lower our costs. We can do things much quicker than a human can, and so reducing the amount of overtime that that person has to do. If they're patching a critical application, it's typically happening outside of your normal working business hours. It's happening very late at night, across the weekends. We can now take that back, and so we're not paying overtime anymore. And also means is that our staff now go from doing the typical operational tasks to more of the project-oriented tasks of growing and transforming your business. With our process, by automating, we're leading to less downtime because we're being much more consistent in how we manage our processes, how we patch, and also by doing so, we're going to achieve much greater security and compliance because we can be sure that it's happening the same way every time. And because we're automating things, as I said, we can do it much quicker, and so therefore we can do it in much smaller windows, and therefore the impact to the business is going to be less and we can do it at more frequent times. So rather than taking an application down for an entire weekend once a quarter, we can automate it and do it in a shorter space of time every month. So achieving that greater compliance as well. And so by investing into the automation, you're investing into your own technology, you're going to see some real ROI. By buying a tool that's going to eliminate the costs that you are typically paying in overtime, it's a very real ROI, and it's something difficult to argue against. So in OPAS itself, we're continuing to patch, to develop this project. We are, as I said, we support clusters, SQL clusters, high availability applications, and we're going to continue to invest in that and broaden the scope of our support. So with that being said, let's have a look at OPAS in action. And if just bear with me. So this is OPAS itself. This is the dashboard. Architecturally, what we're looking at here is obviously a web UI. It connects to a web service, and the web service actually then talks to a Windows service. So in the previous versions of this, our automation engine was Orchestrator, a whole series of Orchestrator runbooks. We found we hit every single roadblock that Orchestrator has. And so what we then moved into was a Windows service that is much more scalable, it is significantly faster, and it's much more easy. It's much easier to develop on. So within our dashboard here, we do some environmental health checks here. So we're looking to make sure we can connect to our management server for SCOM. We're looking to that the OPAS components are healthy, so the web service, the Windows service, they're all healthy. And then we're looking at SCCM. And so I've left this deliberately here as flagged, and what it's telling us here is that the following nodes don't have an SCCM update deployment targeted, and so won't receive updates. So these are all actually dummy nodes that I've added in here. But what it does, it tries to connect to them. Some of them aren't dummy nodes, some are real ones. It tries to connect to them, and if it sees that it can't connect to them, or it doesn't have a software update deployment targeted, it flags it here. So sometimes, in SCCM, you may have targeted a deployment. The machine hasn't been in the collection to receive that deployment, and you only found out after the fact, wondering why it didn't install those patches. So again, another great example of where we do the pre-flight check to make sure everything is lined up correctly for a successful patching scenario. Here in the middle, we've just got some metrics here of how many, the total number being patched at the moment, how many configured clusters or application groups we have, and a total number of hours saved. So this is a runtime of hours that are running that we've spent within OPAS patching. So this may well be with time that you'd have spent done manual efforts. And here just a breakdown of our different types of groups that we've got. We've got application groups, Exchange tags, and Windows failover clusters. We'll look at those in a bit more detail. Below here, we'd see a patching process. So this is a near real-time representation of what's actually happening in your patching scenario. One of the challenges with SCCM is that you deploy the updates and then you then have to sit and wait. You may trigger the installation to happen a bit faster by refreshing the computer policy on the clients. But then you are then left to pressing F5 in the console. It takes a long time because SCCM reports back patching status using state messages, and by default state messages are processed every 15 minutes, and then they're summarized every 60 minutes in the console. So you have a lag there of information about what's happening during the patching process here. And as we'll see shortly, we'll see this in sort of real-time information of what's happening. So what I'd like to do here is that we have, we're going to patch a couple of scenarios here. First one, we're going to patch a 3-node exchange DAG. And I want to kick that off right away, just so that it's something that we can watch during the patching process. It probably takes around 40 minutes or so. But we can actually see it in action and real time, and you can actually see it happening. So we select our exchange DAG here. We can then select a schedule that we want to use, and we'll look at schedules shortly, but here I'm just going to execute immediately. We have some various options around overriding the SCOM maintenance mode if we've set there. And then we just have a summary here of nodes. So our execution job has created. If we actually return to the dashboard here, we can see immediately that it sent a notification to me to say, it's going to say you're starting patching. Also notice here that we have pause and stop buttons. So if I look at this and I thought this wasn't supposed to happen now, I can either stop it immediately or I can pause it. And here you'll notice it's automatically enumerated all 3 nodes of the exchange DAG. So let's have a look at adding in clusters and application groups within it. So if we jump to our exchange services here, notice here if we want to add a new one in, all we do is we add in the name of the exchange DAG. We say how long we want for SCOM maintenance mode, and we put a contact. That's all you have to do. The exchange DAG, the name, so essentially this is the cluster name, is going to be it's going to enumerate all the nodes automatically. So that is what you've seen here happen here at the dashboard. It's automatically figured out there are 3 nodes within the DAG. And also you can see that it's figured out that there are 2 patches to install. And here we're going to send it. So it's actually connecting to the exchange. It's then going to start maintenance mode. It is already running through all these pre-flight checks. You can see in the dashboard it's patching 1 cluster. So this is great information to put up in your network operations center. You put it on the big screen. They can see exactly what is being patched, what is happening. They can see if there's been failures. This information isn't easily available via SCCM. So just jumping back here, our Windows failover clusters are exactly the same sort of scenario. We add them in. We just need to specify the name of the cluster, the maintenance mode for SCOM, and an email notification contact. We don't need to specify the nodes. They're enumerated automatically. For Windows failover clusters, we support Windows Server 2008 R2 and above. For our Exchange, we support Exchange 2010 and above. So if you're not using failover clusters, part of the problems you may have would be just these complex applications that are a real pain. They need to be patched in a specific order. You have to shut down various services first. If you're rebooting them, you have to bring them up in a very specific way. So for those sort of scenarios, we have what's called application groups. These also may be, say, domain controllers that are not part of a traditional failover cluster. So they are services or servers that all share a common service, but not servers that you would patch all at the same time. You don't want to bring all your domain controllers down at the same time. You'll have bigger problems. So here we will specify our domain controllers, and what will happen, we will step through and patch each domain controller individually, just taking one at a time, stepping through. This could also be web servers behind an NLB, just stepping through them one at a time, not bring them down, just making sure that we can just do one and that service is available constantly. So there are application groups. Also notice here we have validation tasks. So this is where we're providing our application validation. We're providing the automation, the ability to do those manual checks easily and in an automated fashion. If we go down to validation tasks, so these are our pre-created validation tasks. And just so you know how we got this list, basically we worked with a client who performed virtually all of their manual checks, and they had them all documented in an Excel spreadsheet. They had a significant number of servers, but the actual number of checks that they performed was over 1,000. And what we do, we looked at all those validation tasks, and we thought, well, we're seeing a lot of commonality here. We're performing the same action each time. And so what we then did was built out the validation, and that was the idea we had, to build out the validation tasks, where we could pretty much do all of those manual checks with these 10 or so validation tasks. So if you're using PowerShell DSC in your environment, you can either trigger it to apply it or test it here. Also notice we have a stop on failure here. So if this particular validation task fails, then stop the patching process. You know, you may be performing a task that is absolutely critical, and if it fails, I don't have to proceed with my patching because I'm not confident things are healthy enough to proceed. We can also specify a sleep duration here. So if you want to run a particular task, but you want it then to, you know, allow 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or whatever to run, or just a pause, then you can specify a sleep duration as well. We can check for specific reports. So you can see here for a domain controller, we're looking for key services on a domain controller, the DNS and the Kerberos or LDAP. We're then checking to see that it's TCP or UDP, or whether it's up or down. So for example, you might have a server in a a sensitive area of your network. You want to make sure that specific ports aren't open, and you can easily check to make sure that's the case. We can then make sure that applications are running on a server. So if you may have an application that's perhaps not part of a Windows service, and there's plenty of critical applications out there that are, still vendors aren't running things as Windows services. We see that a lot. And so what we can do is make sure that the service itself is running. We can also use operators here to make sure that the number of processes are what we expect. So you can specify a count, and with the operator we can see it not equals, greater than equals. So you can get very specific about how you determine how many or which processes are running. A real common one we see with our customers is services. So you want to make sure that various critical services are up. And here we've got an actual service controller. So we can make sure that the service is started or stopped or restarted, or just check its status. I want to make sure it's up and running. And we can see whether it's started or stopped as well. So you just specify the Windows service name in here, and you can do that. We can also check for native SQL backups as well. So if you are using SQL backups, we can include or exclude specific databases from backups, and we can also make sure that the backups are within a certain backup age. If you're not using SQL backups, but you have the ability to query another repository to see whether backups are available, then you can put your own SQL query in here. So we can see here we're doing a SQL backup on this particular cluster, and we're just interested in these two databases. You can ignore the rest. If they're not within 24 hours, stop. We shouldn't proceed. We don't have a current backup. We can also check URLs to make sure an application, a web application, is up. So here we're looking to make sure Outlook Web Access is available. And we can do a regex check on the page itself to make sure we're seeing absolutely the content we're wanting. You can put your own HTTP status code in here as well, so you might be checking for a redirect, or you don't get a 200 when you check a particular web page, so you can configure that itself. And you can also specify your own timeout. So if you find that an application should be up within 15 seconds and it doesn't respond in that time frame, it takes 30 seconds, well, I want to stop here because there's something wrong. The website shouldn't be taking that long to come back up again. A real common one is just performing IIS actions as well. So we can do a start, a stop, or a restart on IIS, and also make sure it's in an expected state. So stopping all web services prior to patching is a common scenario. If you've built a lot of automation in Orchestrator already, why waste that? Why reinvent the wheel if it's working fine? What we can do here is just call that specific runbook at whichever point you want, and just make use of the automation you've built already. And then we also have a PowerShell script, so you can run any PowerShell script, and we've built in a couple of scenarios here. A common question we get asked is, can you automatically uninstall patches? No, we can't uninstall patches because the nature of patching itself, it's hard to do, and it's almost on a case-by-case basis. Some patches can be uninstalled. Some require dependencies to be uninstalled. Some can't be uninstalled at all. So our rollback recommendation is that if it's critical, then create a snapshot of it. So here we can have, there's a PowerShell script there to create a Hyper-V checkpoint. Or if you're using VMware environment, then create a snapshot via VMware. A couple of other scenarios we have here is just to, well, I want to make sure that all the services that were running before I patched, we have that same state post-patching. So what we do here is a script to just grab all the services we're running, put it into a CSV file on the target machine. So we would run this prior to patching, and then after patching, then let's run a check again. So run the same script again, write the results out to a CSV file, then compare the two CSV files. If there's a difference between the two, throw an exception. So a great way of just doing a before and after check, just to make sure everything's healthy. And here we've got a write fax script, which we're going to trigger off shortly. So sending and receiving faxes just to make sure write fax is healthy. And then we have running our own remote programs here. So you might have a utility that has to be run remotely. You specify the path on the target machine. Essentially what we're doing here is pretty much the same as PS exec. We are specifying what we want to run on the remote machine, we're supplying the parameters, and then we're looking at the expected output. So we're looking at the standard out or the error code from running that program on the remote machine to make sure it's running successfully. And then finally here we can run SQL queries. So here we're checking to make sure that SQL Always On is healthy and synchronized. And if it's not, then stop. And here just a simple check just to make sure post-patching all our databases are online. So essentially the process you do is you define what you want to do, what you run via application validation through your validation tasks. Here you're defining almost like the runbook of what needs to happen. So once you've defined all those processes, you can come back up to your application groups or your clusters, and you can add them in. So for example, if we look at our domain controller here, we can add in these services that we want to check. So we're checking to make sure ADFS service is up. We want to say the DNS ports are up, so let's add those in. And you can see that we've then added them in on the right-hand side here. And if we click on one of them, we can choose exactly when we want to run that validation task. So we can run it on cluster start. So probably not applicable for domain controllers because they're not part of a traditional cluster, but you can choose to run it on node start. Here we're doing a check port. This is going to run on node end, and I'm just going to give this one a sequence number of 2. What I want here is a really neat thing is we can choose to run it on all those nodes that we've defined, so DC1, 2, or 3, or we can run it on a specific one. So this one I'm going to run it on all. This is another one, so let's do this one on node end. Let's give this one actually a sequence of 3, and we want to run it on all of them. And similarly for this one, let's go 3, and let's run it on all of them. But here we've got ADFS. Now our ADFS is only on DC01, so we don't want to run that task on 2 and 3 because we know it's going to fail. So what we can do is on node end is choose to only run this on DC01. So what this gives us, and this is extremely powerful, it gives us the ability to run, if we have an application, a 3-tiered application, a SQL server, an application server, a web front end, is that patching them has to happen in a very specific manner, and you need to run specific tasks on those specific nodes. So you want to shut down the application services, so you would have a validation task to do that, and you would target it just to that application server. But for the web server, you want to run an IIS stop, and so you would specify an IIS stop on the web server. So you can take all those steps that you want to do, and you can automate them. And what you're seeing here is essentially automation out of a box. You know, stopping a service on a remote machine via script, it's a very trivial task. But if you then want to do that across 200, 500 servers, you can't possibly scale. You need a framework in order to do those very simple automated tasks. Orchestrator will do it, but even Orchestrator, it doesn't really provide you an easily scalable solution. Within Orchestrator, yes, you can drag your icons on, your activities on to do it, but then you need to start to think about error handling, you need to think about logging. All those sort of things come at a cost, and it's not a trivial cost. And so here, you're getting that automation out of a box, but you're also getting all the best practices that you should be doing with the logging, the error handling, and that type of thing. So then, once you've saved your validation tasks, sorry, it looks like I didn't save them properly there, but you would see here, as we see for the right facts, your validation tasks would appear here. So with our right facts one, we're checking something like 12 services. And we're also checking to make sure that the URL for right facts is up, and we're doing this right on cluster end. And checking all these services, notice here that we're sequencing, so it's going to run through each particular service in that order to make sure that they're all available. Sorry, there you go. So once you've defined your, actually let's go back to our Exchange node here to see if it's still happening. So we can see here we have already completed Exchange DAG 03. So just refresh there. It's successfully installed 2 patches. It's now on Exchange DAG 02, and it's running through them, and it's up to rebooting that server. The whole process started 17 minutes ago, and on this particular one, Exchange DAG 2, it's been patched in for 4 minutes. Great information, real time. I know exactly what's happening here. Great stuff. So I mentioned before we have our own scheduling engine. So if we look here, we see a nice calendar view of our patches. So nothing happened in October, but we look for November. We can see some of the maintenance we've got here defined. So if we want to add in and you schedule, we have a number of fairly powerful options available here. So we can just do a test, and we can add our patching. We could just do a one-off. We can do a recurring or a fixed day or a relative day. So what a fixed day means, I want to happen on the 10th of the month or the 12th of the month. Whatever you choose, you can specify that. A relative day is slightly more complex but very powerful, and essentially what it does is says, I want to patch on a specific day of a month based on a core date. So for example, I want to patch my dev surveys on patch Tuesday plus 2 days. And so I can specify the Tuesday, it happens in the second week, it's going to happen on a monthly basis, but I want to offset that by 3 days. Or if I want to do the first weekend patch past Tuesday, I'd probably offset that by 4 days. You don't have this ability within SCCM to do this, but it's something that most organizations do. They base all their patching off a specific date, typically patch Tuesday. So you define all your schedules that you want to use there. If we go back up to our execution here, I want to patch our WriteFax server. So if we just go to our WriteFax box here, a lot of organizations have WriteFax. It's a critical component. You know, we deal with a lot of insurance customers. We have the whole business virtually runs on faxing. Lawyers use a lot of faxing. It is almost a critical business application that's often overlooked. Here, we've defined what a successful patching scenario looks like. We're going to patch the box, but we want to make sure that all these services are running. And then we want to send a test fax and receive a test fax. And so we'll do that as well. So we're not going to choose a schedule here. We're just going to execute immediately. And we're not going to choose any of the options here, and we'll finish and run through it. So now we jump back to our dashboard here. We can see that our WriteFax dev notification has gone in. We see that a notification has gone out to me. It's going to say that your patching has started, and we'll begin. It's running through those pre-flight checks that we talked about. Within our real-time information here, we're just seeing what the current state of what's happening is. So for example, Exchange DAG 02 is rebooting. It's telling us, so I'm going to wait 15 minutes for the SCCM agent to start. If it doesn't come back up in 15 minutes, I'm going to throw a failure. The 15 minutes is configurable. You know, you may have some physical boxes that take a lot longer to reboot, so you can change that. But you're just seeing what happened before, what's happening at the moment. If you want to see detailed information of what happened in the past, then we have that in our history. So we can drill down to our Exchange DAG here, and we see a really nice summary of what's happened so far. We can see our third node here, and we can see that the boxes, which patches they installed, how long it took. We can see the next one that's going to be patched, 01. We see 02 is running. We can then drill into the third node here, and we can see exactly what's happening within the patching process. So here it's running all those pre-flight checks, checking for disk space. We've got sufficient disk space. We've got 2 gig. There's actually 17 gig free. Excuse me. And then it's going to make sure that there's two updates to install. Sends me the notification. So you're getting really detailed information of what's happening during the patching process. A lot of great information. And what it's also doing, it's in a fairly easily understandable log here. But if you're more familiar with the CM trace format of your logging, you know, as a SCCM admin, you may be used to that. Well, we can also export that log, and you can get the same information in CM trace. So just giving you great detail of what's happening during the patching process. if we go back up to our dashboard here, we can see that our right fax box, it's already installed our 3 patches and it's triggering the reboot automatically. Now, this to happen in SCCM would have taken considerably longer because we would have had to wait for machine policy to do it. Here, we're driving everything with interacting directly with the SCCM client. Because we're automating, we figured out the exact steps that need to happen in order for patching to be successful. We've also using an event-based model, so we are looking, we're waiting for things to happen. Once they happen, we act upon them. What that gives us is the ability to do things very, very quickly. And so that is why we can trigger patches, we can install them, and it's rebooting. All of this has happened within 3 minutes. If we have a look here in our history, our right fax machine, we can see all those tasks that happened within our right fax thing. So let's see which there are 2 updates to install. It's going to proceed with them, and then it's starting SCOM maintenance mode. Because we didn't specify a maintenance mode, it's going to actually do this for 24 hours by default. So what we need to do here, I'm just waiting for the right fax server to come back up again. It should be up shortly, and then it's going to start triggering an installation. What I want to show you though is that I talked about the notifications we see. And so some of the notification we'll see here is that there's 2 patches to install on right fax, and we're going to start installing them straight away. In a test we did earlier is that we actually send out an OPAS patching report. So this is on our right fax server. It took 8 minutes to install, 2 updates installed, and here we get the validation of everything that we're supposed to see. So it was checking all these services. It tells us how long it took, and it's also saying, should this pass? And you're saying, yes, this has to pass, so this is true. So you might have a task that, well, if it failed, it's not critical, but I'd like to know if it failed, but it shouldn't fail the overall process. And here we're flagging whether something was successful or not. Also note that this is happening in the very order that we specified in. So if we just take a moment here just to digest the impact of something like this, is a question we're asked is, well, you know, can OPAS help with our QA? And you think, absolutely it can, because you need to test your patches before they go to production. If you then define your QA within your application validation, so these are the steps. So if, in order for me to pass the server by to pass the server, and so it's ready for production, then I perform all these checks. I make sure the service is up, I make sure this application is running or can run, I make sure the website is up. All those sort of scenarios you define as validation tasks. And then you will put your test client into OPAS, and you just deploy patches. You can trigger them with our scheduler. We can have the patches go the first Wednesday after Patch Tuesday. And so you're then automating your QA of your applications. And here you can then grab this email, you can attach it to the change control board. Have you tested these patches? And you can say, absolutely I have, and there's the proof. You know, you're not even relying on someone to type an email that says, yeah, these look okay. So you have the automated proof that the application was healthy post-patching. So if we have a look here, we've had some notifications come through. And so here we're actually now moving to our 3rd node of Exchange. It finished the 2nd node there. it's then saying we've got another, so it's finished the write fax one, and then now we have our report here. So we look at the date, it's on the 22nd, which is today obviously, and it ran through and it successfully patched all those ones and installed 2 updates. And so then if we come back here, what it's then doing is that it's running the PowerShell script to make sure it's going to be able to send and receive faxes. So let's just jump back to our machine, and I need to RDP onto it. Just take a while to connect to this machine. So this is a PowerShell script that we developed that will send a fax from one queue and obviously receive it in another queue, and we're just making sure that the core functionality is up. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember. Oops, I see I've forgotten the password for this, sorry. But essentially what we'd see here, we would see the send and receive of the faxes into the queues. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with write faxes, I can't remember the password to do that. But that's where we'd be able to check it. And we've seen from previous examples of when we've run it, and we can actually go down to look at the validation tasks, and we can see that they all patched and installed successfully. So that is our overview of OPAS. It's using automation to do your application validation. Patching, the patching bit, you know, most of the companies can get some way of there to automate out of the box from SCCM. But like I said, the final 20% that is typically done manually takes 80% of your time. It's very costly. It's relying on human interaction, human processes that can lead to mistakes. You know, these are critical applications. They need to be up Monday morning, functioning and testing and working. And with OPAS, we provide you the ability to do that in a completely automated manner. Okay, Georgia, back over to you.
Great, thank you, Luke. That was fantastic. Great demo, great information. And Justin, thank you very much for being Luke's partner here and answering a lot of questions that have come in. For the benefit of everyone else, I will be sending out these questions and answers after the event, so not to worry. And in fact, it looks like we do have another question that's come in. So, no, Justin, do you want to field this one as well?
Yep, I'm actually answering that as I speak.
All right.
Yeah, so I can also speak to that. So can you upload existing application groups into OPAS or sync it with the CMDB tool? So there's a couple of components to that. Because we've written, OPAS essentially has a web service. We have a web service that we can obviously automate against. It's an automation tool after all. And so if you have a huge list of application groups and their members, we have sample PowerShell scripts that can easily load them in if you have many of them. A common ask though is, well, I want to sync groups or collections from SCCM. That is on our roadmap. We don't have anything on that yet, but it's something we're looking very closely at. Similarly, people maybe want to synchronize maintenance windows with schedules. There's still a lot to figure out there, but it's certainly something that we're looking at. We have worked with customers in the past where we've done this and we used a custom orchestrator runbook to do exactly what they did, or syncing groups from a CMDB into OPAS. But that was specific for them, and so we're looking for feedback on how people would want that scenario to work. And so yeah, it's absolutely something we're looking at.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? We have a few minutes. In fact, we're a bit ahead of schedule, so you'll probably have a longer lunch, breakfast, or dinner, depending on where you're from. But I believe Luke and Justin can hang on for a couple more minutes.
So I see that one of the questions previously looked at, if a check failed, will we see those results in SCOM, or is SCOM maintenance stopped to sustain? Now that's an interesting scenario, because it's something that people have said, because the server is now being patched, or sorry, in maintenance mode, they may not get the alerts for it. So we are looking at a management pack for OPAS itself, which will help with that interaction between SCOM and OPAS, and also provide you greater visibility into the health of OPAS itself as well. So we can see here, we have some custom environmental health checks here, but it'd be great if this information was also in SCOM as well, and that's certainly something we're looking at.
All right, well, if there are any more questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat box, and we will get back to you with responses. That gives you an hour now for a break until we have Microsoft and Heat Software doing their presentations. Thank you very much, Luke and Justin. They are our OPAS experts. Justin is, in fact, the Senior Program Manager and has done a lot of work with OPAS, as has Luke, so they have all the answers. I will have a timer on the screen here counting down one whole hour, so it will keep you all in the know as to when to come back. Have a good break, and we'll see you in an hour. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Georgia. Can you guys still hear us?
Sound great?
Perfect. Welcome. Well, I'm going to kick it off and then pass it to Maayan. We are really excited to be here today, and as we do present some of the things in our future direction, this is sort of standard disclaimer slide. Maayan, you want to say anything on the disclaimer slide?
Yeah, I'll get to it when we cover SCCM in a few slides.
Great. So, as Microsoft sort of investing in System Center 2016 and looking at some of the ways that our customers are using the System Center components and products and all the things that are happening in IT, we are looking at a number of things across this round of building a modern management product, and a few of the trends that we're seeing in the industry that we're reacting to and building as part of our roadmap are included here that we wanted to cover before we dive into the System Center features. The first and most important is sort of this new disruption on services and products and value being offered as a service. You've seen lots of different products being disrupted from the customer relationship management side, enterprise resource management, you name the software stack, it's being disrupted through this as a service delivery model as it really frees customers from having to deploy it, maintain it, install it, size it, and continue running, and really moves the customer value chain to really getting value from the features without having to do a lot of the maintenance behind the scenes, and management and the software that we provide from configuration management to monitoring is also seeing that same disruption, and it's going to be something that we continue to invest in going forward. Data analytics and the sort of big data tools, the ways that we can now leverage and collect vast amounts of data and not have to really configure a system to collect just the tiny bit of data we need that sort of causes some thresholds to be chosen, and then sometimes sort of noisy alerting systems. Being able to collect vast amounts of data, whether it be security, whether it be for logs, whether it be telemetry from your business processes, being able to collect all of that data, analyze it, search over it, view it, and view it not just from your internal sort of dashboards that are available inside your company, but be able to view it from any HTML5 browser, any mobile console, any iOS, Android app, and be able to have access to this data so that you can get the insights out of the data is what we're also investing in. And the next trend, just as virtualization really changed the game for how IT provides services, offers services with on top of physical services, we're seeing a huge change coming in the ways that apps will run in containers and be containerized. And we're trying to get ahead of the curve and make sure that sort of our modern management approach can cover how to deploy containers, monitor the things running inside containers, make sure the configuration of containers is updated, make sure that containers can be moved, that we can help IT embrace this new development application delivery model as microservices are built to run in containers. And then finally, sort of another area of cloud modern management we call it is around sort of this IT graph of your apps and your components, and how do you understand what's connected, what's dependent, so that you could, for example, use it for cloud migrations, but you could also use it to help you understand when to patch a particular server based on the real-time connections that it's making or that different apps are making towards it. And in June of this calendar year, just a few months ago, we bought a company called Blue Stripe that built a product called Fact Finder that we're working on integrating into the modern management set of services and products, so that you can understand how those connections for your apps are changing over time from the server perspective, so that you can use that IT graph of information for potentially patching, for potentially doing a cloud migration. So if you think about sort of where we are in this evolution, Microsoft has been sort of in this enterprise management space for a number of years, sort of over decades, starting in enterprise desktop, and as servers became sort of more widespread from underneath the desks to into the data centers, running workloads like Active Directory and Exchange, and then becoming virtualized or still running physical and having some virtualization and physical split, and then having some split between physical, virtual, and sort of this new private cloud and then public cloud. We see this next iteration or this next round of investments really is what we're calling modern management, where we feel there's a really great set of features that we provide for things in the data center with System Center, but then also some of our services in tune for client scenarios and operations management suite for data scenarios, where we can increase the time to value for customers and really give them capabilities across the board as they're leveraging the components that they've already installed and leveraged that have really deep extensibilities, and also give them access to some of these new things that we're providing in this as a service delivery model, where there's less maintenance, there's sort of more immediate value, and you know, there's just a different delivery model. So in this customer journey, we definitely understand there's lots of different types of customers that exist. Lots of different customers that are sort of ready for public cloud services. Some customers aren't ready for public cloud services, and we definitely recognize this. And as this customer journey sort of develops, as you're sitting there sort of looking at these slides, you can think about where do you fall in that journey. Are you sort of still really a System Center customer today that can't leverage any services, that can't leverage any, your data maybe can't leave your premise, you've got compliance rules as to maybe where some of that monitoring data, where that performance data can live and reside, and how it's controlled? Or are you a customer, and we're starting to see these already, a customer that is sort of moving to the service delivery model sort of a lot faster than other customers, because you can start using services. You're sort of past the point of installing, maintaining these systems, or are you sort of in between? And right now we're seeing a large majority of the EBCs and the different customer conversations that we have. They're really sort of in that center mode where they're looking at System Center and the operations management suite, and the two together. Really adding value to the scenarios that aren't part of the on-prem products, that are in the services, and really using both together. And that's a huge focus from our perspective. From a schedule perspective, and this is sort of last slide before we jump right into the config manager features, you can think of there's really two different streams as you look at this roadmap slide. There are System Center investments that are going to continue. Update roll-ups, release quarterly for the different System Center components, but also technical previews for the System Center 2016 and Windows Server 2016 feature set, with technical preview 3 being available now and 4 being available in Q4, and technical preview 5 coming in early 2016 in Q1, and then a mid-2016 RTM for the 2016 release. And then the operations management suite, sort of more of a cloud cadence as we release services. We work with customers on testing those services and sort of roll out them more continuously. In some cases weekly, in some cases sort of monthly. But we're looking at getting into sort of a quarterly or sort of a monthly set of trains where you can see what are the main features that we were building and sort of where we're going. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Maayan, who can tell you more about these configuration manager features for 2016 and what's happening this year, and what we've learned from our technical previews today.
Thanks, Vlad. Hi, everybody. I'm Maayan Bar-Niv. I am a program manager on the config manager team here in Redmond. And over the next 30 minutes or so, we'll cover some of the new functionality that's coming in Config Manager. Now, just to go back to that disclaimer slide, I want to set expectations that this is not tied to any specific timeline. So the features that we'll talk about today, you may or may not see in the Q4 release of Config Manager that Vlad talked about. We will cover some items that we announced back in May at Ignite, and then some additional items that are already in our technical previews that were released over the recent months. We're going to start with some of the functionality that we're adding to support Windows 10 in the enterprise, including keeping it up to date, managing. We're going to talk about a new updates and servicing model that the next version of Config Manager will include. And then finally, we will talk about cluster-aware settings that enable better controlling and orchestrating clusters in a server, servers in a cluster. All right. So let's talk about Windows 10 for a minute. Now, some of the great benefits of Windows 10 and promises for businesses is, of course, protecting against security threats more than ever before. We're talking about rich management capabilities, and we'll see over the next few slides how Config Manager and Intune support those management capabilities. And beyond everything, it allows your users to be more productive where and when they need to be productive. Now that includes, of course, a variety of devices, whether they're PCs, mobile devices. All of these can be managed through Intune and Config Manager, and we'll see how. So when you plan for Windows 10 in your organization, there are really three main things that you want to consider. One is how you get there. You want to choose the best deployment method for your organization, and in some cases that would be a mix of several deployment options. We'll talk about that. Then you want to obviously keep it up to date. Windows 10 as a service is moving quickly. There are updates coming every few months, and if you're on that branch, you need to think about all the implications and how you continue to manage your Windows 10 systems. And then, of course, just the ongoing management with all this richness of capabilities of managing security and protection and keeping your users productive. So let's start with choosing the best deployment method for your organization. Now, there is a variety of options to get there. I'm not going to cover all of them. Sorry, hold on. We have a technical issue here with PowerPoint. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. So we're not going to cover all the operating system deployment options that Config Manager offers. All those options that have been there in the past are still there, including installing Windows on a clean machine, wipe and load, and so on. You can also enroll Windows 10 devices for mobile device management and provision either through Intune or Config Manager. But what I want to touch on real quick is one new capability that we're adding, and that is in-place upgrade. What this means is that in-place upgrade that Windows 10 supports is natively built into Config Manager through task sequences. So basically, you can use task sequences without any dependencies to run in-place upgrades from Windows 7, 8, 8.1 while preserving user data, application settings. So it's really not disruptive to end user. It's almost seamless. It's lightweight. It's quick, and it has no dependencies on anything other than SCCM itself. So no dependencies on the ADK. This is a really lightweight, simple option through task sequences. It is available for a technical preview. So if you have one of the technical previews that we've released over the last few months, you can try it in your lab. Now, talking a little bit about technical previews, we've moved to a model where we release features as early as we can for preview. One of the reasons is that with Windows moving faster and mobile device management, we are adding functionality all the time. And so we want to give our customers the option to be prepared for what's coming. Since May, we have released 3 technical previews and 2 updates. So practically an update or new functionality coming every month. and you really want to try it in your labs and kind of experience what's coming and give us your feedback. So please do try the technical previews. Moving on to keeping Windows 10 up to date. What does that mean? So those of you who have not seen this before, Windows as a service really operates in kind of a ring model. So when we talk about the builds for Windows, obviously it starts as engineering builds, internal. And then it progresses to broad Microsoft internal validation. That means Microsoft employees, tens of thousands of users, are trying these builds and validating them. So this is all internal. Now the next step is the Microsoft Insider Preview branch. We're talking about several million users who try out these capabilities, provide feedback, and then finally, we're talking about the current branch. Current branch is the branch that most consumers will be using. So we're talking about hundreds of millions of users here. And finally, current branch for business. This is when businesses, enterprises will be getting the features, the updates for their users. And of course, businesses themselves would have their own ring model. So maybe starting with a small ring for initial validation and maybe lab environment and pilot users and so on until the broad use of the entire organization. So when you think about that for your organization, here are some of the things that you'd consider. You'd consider perhaps putting some of the users on the Insider Preview branch. The reasons you want to do that is you want early access, you want visibility to what's coming. So this would be probably test machines, some early adopters. Then you'd want some users on the current branch. The current branch will be arriving several months before the current branch for business. So you want maybe early adopters, maybe IT internal users to try out what's coming in the current branch. Then probably most of the rest of the company would be on current branch for business. And finally, you want to think about the long-term servicing branch of Windows. This is a build that would basically be in support for a long time. You'd want to use it for mission-critical systems, systems that you don't want to be touched, you don't want updates on those. So these are the things that you want to consider. And in most organizations, we expect to see a mix of those, and what that mix looks like really depends on your specific requirements and your needs. Now, how does Config Manager support that? I want to show you just a couple of things. This is a new Windows 10 servicing dashboard that we're adding. It is already available in our most recent technical preview. And what you see here, this is fake data, so it might not make entire sense with the numbers, but what you see here is basically visualization of what the different branches and rings look like in your organization. So on the right side ring, you see how many machines are on current branch for business, long-term servicing branch. On the left one, you'd see the specific builds that they're on. And you'd also be getting alerts for how many machines are on builds that are soon to be out of support. So you get all of that here. You also are able to create new servicing plans through here. So say I want to create a specific ring for my current branch for business. I can define it here. I can use a target collection. I don't have many collections on this environment, but I could maybe define a collection that represents my pilot users for CBB. And then what I could also do is I could check a box to say, hey, before we broadly deploy this, I want a pilot collection. So that would be an even smaller collection than the one I target the branch to, and I only want to deploy to the rest of the collection after, say, 95% of the pilot collection machines were deployed successfully. So this is really just bringing to the front everything that has to do with Windows 10 servicing, making it more accessible and visual. Another thing, I'm going to move on to administration. We've added a new node here called Updates and Servicing. Now this is a whole new model for Config Manager, and I mentioned we need to move fast. Our model of releasing cumulative updates and service packs, we know that takes a while for organizations to apply. Even for us internally in engineering, we need the ability to deliver content quickly. So what we've added here is basically an in-console option to deliver updates. Basically, every time we deliver an update, and imagine, Windows 10 is releasing a new update on the current branch or on the current branch for business, Config Manager needs to support that. It's also relevant for mobile device management, so, a new iOS version and so on. This will all be available here, so you can see the updates that are available for you. And all you need to do really is right-click and say Install Update Pack. You can see the description of what's in it. You can later enable the specific features. If there are several features in this update pack, you can enable those, and it's all in one place in the console, permission-based. So a really simplified model for getting those updates and having Config Manager be up to date and supporting the latest Windows and MDM changes. All right, so we talked about deploying Windows 10. We talked about keeping up to date, and now just for the day-to-day management, the protection. There are practically over 100 policies that are configurable by MDM with Windows 10. All the new features that are supported through MDM are available through Config Manager and through Intune for management. And this means for you as an organization, basically you could choose how you manage your Windows 10 devices. You could, if you're only looking for the settings and the policies and application management, do that through mobile device management. And if you need the richer, deeper support for, say, things like operating system deployment or remote control, you could do that with the full Config Manager client. Now, of course, there could also be a mix. So maybe some devices you want to manage through MDM, maybe phones you manage through MDM, and maybe PCs or systems or servers you want to manage with a full Config Manager client, but you really get to pick and choose. And one of the things that we've added to simplify this choice is really to make it based on your scenario. So those of you familiar with Intune and SCCM and how they work together today, this is what we have now. This is what we have supported today, which is basically two options. What you could do is you could manage devices, mobile devices, through Intune with the web console. So that's completely separate from SCCM. It would make sense for organizations that are looking for an MDM solution and do not have Config Manager today. Another option is a hybrid setting with Config Manager. So in this case, you would attach Intune to your existing SCCM hierarchy. You'd manage the mobile devices through Intune, and you'd manage PCs, servers, Linux through Config Manager. Now, Intune and Config Manager talk to one another in the backend, and the nice thing about it is that it's a single experience. So single pane of glass for the admin. They're working through the Config Manager console to control all this variety, breadth of different devices, different platforms in one place. So this is all there today. Now what we're adding is a new on-premise option for mobile device management. This is relevant more for organizations who are looking for Internet of Things scenarios or are highly regulated and cannot have any data stored in the cloud. So what would happen here is mobile devices, and we're talking specifically about Windows 10 devices at this point. Mobile devices talk directly to Config Manager. Policies are sent, data is sent back, stored in the on-premise database, managed through the Config Manager console, and the only connection to Intune or to the cloud really is to get new features like we saw in the demo through the new channel. So this is basically the new model, relevant again if for any reason you cannot connect these devices to the cloud or you don't want to store data in the cloud, and it's going to be available in Config Manager. It's already there in our technical preview, so again, if you want to try it out to test this scenario in your lab, you can do that today. One of the other things, so we talked a lot about Windows 10. That's obviously a big focus for our work. I guess before we move on to cluster-aware settings, just a couple more points. If you are on Config Manager 2007 or 2012 today, you basically can already manage Windows 10. We've released updates for those. So you can manage Windows 10 today with compatibility to what we've had before. So you can do all those things, you know, application management, settings, and so on with 2012 and Config Manager 2007. 2007 does not support OSD with the update, but it's basically there. However, all these new things that we just saw, all these new capabilities, new management scenarios, these are only going to be there in vNext. So starting with the Q4 release that we mentioned before. That was just a note about CM12 and CM07. All right, cluster-aware settings. We're adding an ability to service a cluster. So this is really based on a lot of feedback that we've been hearing from customers. You want the ability to more easily service a cluster. You want to be able to orchestrate. You want to be able to control the order. So this is something that we're working on. Some of that is already available for preview, and I'll show you in a minute. But what we're adding is the ability to create a collection that represents a server cluster. And with that, you can control first of all, the percentage of servers that are online at any given time. And that's important, obviously. I mean, if you have an application that's running on a cluster, you want to make sure that not all the servers in this cluster are serviced simultaneously. So that's something that you want to control. And you're also able to specify PowerShell scripts to run before and after the deployment. So let me show you. So under Assets and Compliance, I'm going to go to Device Collections, and I've added a new collection called My Server Cluster. If I go to Properties here, you can see a new checkbox. This indicates that all devices in this collection are part of the same cluster. You can go to Settings and also define the percentage of the cluster to go offline. So this is our preview build. So the wording here is not very accurate. It's not to go offline. It's to be serviced at any given time. So I can say, you know, no more than 50% of the servers in this cluster are to be serviced at any given time. I can also define the PowerShell script to run before and after. So in this case, you know, just a simple script that that's going to print out the start time and the end time of servicing. And maybe if you want to try this in your lab, you want to do something similar, we have online documentation for how to do that, and you can see the order where it gets serviced. So, so this is again already there in preview. And with that, again, just asking you to please try our previews and provide feedback. This is a great way, you know, with how things are moving forward. We have a new user voice website. If you haven't tried it before, this is a way for you to provide the product group directly with feedback, and we've already taken quite a few suggestions from there, working on several others. So you can propose ideas for new features. You can vote on other features that others have suggested. So again, great way to provide us direct feedback, and we're really taking it seriously and acting on it. And with this new quicker model, you can see results fast. So items that were filed 2 or 3 months ago are already there and supported. All right, so that was the end of our session. Just looking quickly to see if there are any questions online that we can answer.
Thank you, Maayan and Vlad. That was great. Before we answer any questions, I did post in the chat box a link to a survey to have the attendees kindly respond and give us feedback on your great presentation. That was a lot of information. Thank you very much. And yes, open to questions now. I don't see any yet, but we do have quite a bit of time, so we'll hold off and give you a chance to ask a question that you would like answered.
See the survey. Josh doesn't see the survey link.
All right, I just resent it. Thanks, Josh. Everyone should see it now.
I see.
So there is a question here about cluster aware settings being something that's work in progress, what other things are being worked on. So yes, this is available for preview, but some of the things that are not there yet, maybe I can go back and show you. So specifically this second part here, you can see that it's grayed out. That's something that's not there yet in our technical preview. You can specify the order for specific servers in your cluster to be serviced. So that's something that is still work in progress. The other thing that's not there in preview yet is reporting and in-console monitoring that we want to make richer. So yeah, there is still work going on in this area.
I forget actually how what the integration is between maintenance modes. So right now it just pauses the agent, like pauses the Windows service. I guess Del, you can't talk, so maybe you can update the.
If you could add more information about this specific scenario that is broken for you, we can try and address that.
Yeah, right now I don't think there's been any change in behavior for how SCCM puts the SCOM agent into maintenance mode.
But yeah, there is clarification here.
That it does just pause the agent, so I don't think there's been any change in that area. Would potentially do it differently now with this prescript. You could use in your prescript, but no, this prescript is running locally on the cluster node. It's not a good way to put the SCOM agent into maintenance mode from that agent node unless it had access to the server.
So we haven't made any changes in that sense, but that would be great feedback to file on the user voice website. Yep. Please do that, and other customers can vote on that as well. That would be great. Any other questions? Well, Vlad and I are going to be here for the next few minutes if you think of anything else. But thank you for your time and for the great questions, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Vlad and Maayan. That was great. Sure, if you have any other questions that you can think of as the next presentation is happening, then by all means put them in the chat box and I will send them over to Vlad and Maayan. And as mentioned, I will have a transcript of all of the questions and answers for the attendees after the university event. Russ, are you ready to go? It's a few minutes earlier, but if you're all set, I can introduce you and you can take control.
I'm all set.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me all right?
I can hear you perfectly. So a little introduction, and I probably won't do you justice here, but Russ is the Director of Product Management at Heat Software, and Heat Software is one of our newest partners, and we're excited to have them on board. He will tell you a little bit about the company and about himself, and we look forward to a great presentation, Russ, and we can see your slides. All good. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for the time today. Again, my name is Russ Ernst. I'm with Heat Software, formerly Lumention Security, formerly PatchLink, just through a number of mergers and acquisitions, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But today I'm going to be talking about third-party patch management for Microsoft System Center. So first, I'll go through just a little bit about Heat Software, what we do, who we work with. I don't want to spend a lot of time there, but almost a bit of a just a bit of an introduction of Heat Software as a kind of a newer organization, and then talk a little bit about a market overview, get into some details about why we're even in this business, why patch management is important, talk a little bit about some gaps that exist in System Center Configuration Manager when it comes to patch management, and then go into some information about third-party patch management options for Microsoft System Center. Go ahead and include any questions you have at the time into the question and answer box. I'll try to answer that real time, but if not, I'll try to leave some time at the end too to address those. So first off, just a little bit about Heat Software, leading provider of hybrid service management and unified endpoint management software solutions. We have been in market for over 20 years based off of the different components of the organization that make up the new Heat Software. Today I'll be speaking mostly about our patch management solutions, so that we have our heritage there with Lumention Security and some of the work we've done in partnership with Microsoft to create these solutions for Microsoft System Center, as well as back when we were called PatchLink, back before we changed the name back in 2007. So really have been leaders in the patch management space for a long, long time. We have solutions that include service management, that ITSM, ITIL, service management, as well as what we call unified endpoint management and security. This is really a combination of client management solutions, security solutions, as well as endpoint mobility management solutions. And I'll talk to that in a little bit too. A lot of different customers and partners worldwide. Again, you may not have heard of Heat Software, but this is a combination of the former Front Range organization with Lumention Security to form Heat Software. Many different global customers and partners worldwide. Again, we are a worldwide organization headquartered in the Silicon Valley area. So some of the solutions we have when it comes to service management, again, that's around the like the IT ticketing process, incident management, request management, problem management. When we get into the unified endpoint management solution space, that's where we're talking about some client management solutions. What we had previously called the Front Range Heat Desktop and Server Manager, DSM. That includes some OS deployment, some personality migration. It does include patch management, mobile device management. And then on the security side, we have a suite of security solutions around application control, device control, full disk encryption, etc., and as well as a solution that we're calling PatchLink for System Center Configuration Manager 2012. That's why I'll spend the balance of the day talking about that solution when I get into that space. Really, this is focused around our partnership with Microsoft and how we're working together to have a full, robust patching solution through Microsoft System Center. So one last drill down on unified endpoint management. When we talk about UEM, or unified endpoint management as a term, this is what we're talking about. It's a combination of client management tools, enterprise mobility management, and endpoint protection. We really see this as a holistic way of operationalizing these components throughout your organization, and it's beyond just deploying the new OS updates or having some software deployment, but it's really seeing all of these devices through a common view. So whether those endpoints are mobile or are a traditional desktop in your environment, it's being able to see that holistic view across all those devices from both an operational standpoint, deploying updates, etc., deploying packages, as well as the full endpoint protection suite. Again, as I mentioned, seeing things like patch management across the board being viewed as vulnerability management, as well as update management from an operational side. So that's my quick overview on the organization. I do want to spend more time, though, talking about, from a market overview perspective, why this is even important, right? And what's even driving patch management? Why are we still talking about patch management? Patch management is a mature technology. It's been around for a long, long time. In a lot of cases, patch management is really considered to be kind of a solved problem, right? WSUS, SCCM, there are free tools out there that do a great job of keeping your Microsoft desktops and servers up to date with Microsoft updates. So why are we still talking about patch management? And really comes down to a few things. First and foremost, from a security standpoint, if we look at the SANS Security Institute, the best practices for managing your critical security controls within your organization, we see a continuous vulnerability assessment and remediation, patch management, show up there in the top 5, right? It's important to know what's in your environment and having secure configurations in your environment, but it's also very important, even more important than your AV malware defenses, is to have a proactive security solution, and that means having your solutions, your endpoints fully patched. Beyond just the Microsoft, but also to the prevalent and targeted third-party applications on those Windows machines. What else? Oh, there's governmental controls, and so most recently in the last few years we've seen whole countries such as Australia release an overall strategy to mitigate targeted cyber intrusions, and you see right up there at the top, right after application whitelisting, of course, but you see patching your applications and patching your system vulnerabilities. And even above patching your OS, which is number 3 on that list, but number 2 is keeping your applications patched. You know, the bad guys are really going after those prevalent and third-party applications, which I'll talk to more in the next few slides, but it's very important to make sure you've got those third-party applications fully patched in your environment. What else? There are industry-related compliance regulations. So if you're in the healthcare industry, you definitely want to stay patched to be compliant with HIPAA. And if you are accepting any kind of credit card information as part of your organization, you want to make sure you have a complete vulnerability management process in place to be able to pass PCI DSS. So patch is really being driven a lot by your organization. It's being driven by best practices. It's being driven by compliance regulations. It's a good thing to do. Why is it a good thing to do? Well, it's the number one proactive solution to keeping your systems up to date. And when we look at what that means, if I take a look at all of the vulnerabilities reported by MITRE over the last few years, we see back in the mid-2000s there was a big uptick in the number of vulnerabilities reported across the board. Now again, this is all vulnerabilities as reported through the MITRE database. This isn't just a single application or a single vendor. This is all platforms, Linux, Unix, Macs included. This is all applications. And this really goes back to, you know, part of the reason why there was that great initiative started by Microsoft back in 2002 when Bill Gates initiated the Trustworthy Computing Group to really put a magnifying glass on this and to say this is an industry-wide issue, and Microsoft really led the charge with having a proactive approach to addressing this and really kept the rest of the industry in check. And we saw a big kind of uptick in the number of vulnerabilities reported in the mid-2000s, kind of plateaued off a little bit. But then more recently, in the last couple of years, a huge increase in the number of reported vulnerabilities across the board with record numbers last year, and then we're on track this year as well to exceed last year's total to have another record year number of vulnerabilities reported. So again, as I said, this is all across the board. This is all platforms, all applications, all vendors. What does that mean for a specific single vendor, right? We kind of said that patches seems like it's a solved problem, and it really is when it comes to Microsoft. But what does it actually mean if you're only patching your Microsoft platforms and applications? This is a look at all the number of security bulletins Microsoft has released through Patch Tuesdays for the last few years, and I understand that a single patch bulletin released by Microsoft does not equal a single vulnerability. Oftentimes you'll have cumulative updates, like the cumulative update for Internet Explorer will typically address, you know, it could be anywhere from 10 to 30 or so different underlying vulnerabilities in a single update. But it's a good measure because, again, Microsoft has really led the charge in having this repeatable Patch Tuesday process where you can say, yes, here from a single organization's perspective, here's what we're patching this month. And if we look back at that line in 2014, Microsoft was actually on track to have the lowest number of released updates in many years and was doing a great job of keeping all those security updates at a minimum. And when we look at that compared to 2013 in the red line, 2013 actually, and again, this is the list of security bulletins themselves, but when I add up all of the actual vulnerabilities addressed by the security vulnerabilities, Microsoft's share in 2013 was almost 10% of all of the reported vulnerabilities. That's kind of a big number from a single vendor perspective, but really you think about that. If you're only patching for Microsoft's updates, you're leaving a lot of different vulnerabilities out there on the table. And then when I compare that to what was reported in the full year in 2014, there was as I mentioned, a big drop in the total number of bulletins released, and that compare it also to the number of underlying vulnerabilities fixed by those. So when we compare this to the last slide, where last year there was a huge increase in the number of vulnerabilities reported across the board, Microsoft's share actually dropped significantly to just over 6% of owning those vulnerabilities. So to me, that means the bad guys, we're seeing an increased number of vulnerabilities reported. The bad guys are actually targeting the non-Windows platforms and the non-Windows, the non-Microsoft third-party applications on those Windows platforms. So it's really kind of paying off the strategy that Microsoft has had around being proactive with their security approach in the trustworthy computing group, and so the bad guys are saying, well, that's that is the solved problem. Where is our beachhead now into the organization? Well, it's these unpatched third-party applications and non-Windows OS. And that's really played out when we look in the news. We hear about the Heartbleed or the Poodle or the OpenSSL vulnerabilities. These have nothing to do with Microsoft, So these are prevalent vulnerabilities, and very scary exploits are live and wild in the wild. So, but none of those are applicable to any Windows machine. So what are these most prevalent and targeted applications? It's going to be the when we look at the top 50 most prevalent applications, it's going to become some of those usual suspects. It's going to be the browsers, it's going to be the Adobes, the Javas, things that are going to be in your environment that are in your environment, whether you want them there or not. You have some level of productivity you're trying to achieve within your organization. You may have some in-house line of business applications that have been written around Java, for example. So you have versions of Java that are floating around in your organization. Well, if we look at the top 50, 27 of the top 50 had at least one vulnerability written against it or opened up against it in the last couple of years. And that's, Windows, Microsoft, third-party, whatever. 27 of the top 50 had at least one, and those are listed on the right side. But of those top 50, the third-party applications only made up of about a third of the most prevalent applications on the typical desktop. But even though the third-party applications only accounted for a third of the total number, they actually accounted for over 3/4 of the vulnerabilities themselves. So again, that's where, this list I have on the right, it's a list of all of those 27 applications that had at least one vulnerability opened up against it. But it's not sorted by prevalence, it's sorted by the total number of vulnerabilities opened up against that application. So when we see that sort, those types of applications that are going to float to the top, you're going to see the browsers. The most targeted applications out on your desktop today are the browsers. You have the drive-by vulnerabilities that all you have to do is have an open and vulnerable browser targeted and opening up a suspicious or malicious website, and you can lose control of your device. And so you see Firefox, Chrome, IE are up there in the top 5. To round out the top 5, you've got Oracle Java, you've got Adobe Reader. You start getting into those free and prevalent utilities that are out there. Reader, iTunes, Flash Player, Adobe Air. Oh, then the next Microsoft application comes in. So of the top, 8 or 10 there, majority of those are non-Microsoft applications. So it's vitally important. This really corroborates that story I was telling about, the bad guys are really going after those prevalent and targeted third-party applications. So the last case for third-party patch management is around when we look at some third-party analysts like Gartner or CERT, they both report that 90% of the time an application exploit occurred, a patch was already available but just not applied. And further, when we look at the most exploited applications in 2009, 2010, 2011, all the way through last year, 4 of the 5 most exploited applications are not Microsoft applications, but the third-party applications. And that's really played out when we look at the data from the last slide. So it's not just last year. This is an overarching issue over the last 6 years or so, where the bad guys are really going after the prevalent and free applications that are out there. So again, the SANS Institute quotes, that unpatched client applications are the #1 cyber threat in your organization today. So one more point on the security solutions, and I know this is more of an operational audience when we're talking about System Center Configuration Manager, but we know that there are other folks in our organization, the security teams in our organization, that are sometimes working with us to try and keep our systems fully patched or fully compliant. And we might hear some of this rationale. And so from another a security tool out there, Bit9 Carbon Black, which is a detect and respond type security solution, these are very powerful solutions that provide deep security analytics and forensics into the organization once there has been an attack in the organization. And so in the old days, before these types of applications, you would be able to get some kind of a notification possibly that we had an incident and then it's all cleaned up. But now these security solutions are very precise to say, at a specific time, and I'm not going to read that full quote there, but we know exactly who the bad actors are that are coming into the organization, what their history has been, where they were going, what exploit they used, what they were trying to accomplish, and then what I think is important about this is that we highly recommend an immediate patch for the Adobe vulnerability so others are not infected by similar attacks. And for all of the amazing forensics information that's included in this write-up, which is really great information if you're trying to track down an attack after it's already happened. But if the recommendation is just to keep your systems fully patched, that's something you should be doing anyway, right? That's really where it comes into that proactive security approach. This is not just about passing a compliance regulation. Those regulations are in place because these things happen, right? This is a real exploit vector, and by keeping your systems fully patched, you can shut off that exploit vector. So one last data point from the market information before I get into the solutions themselves, but there's a great report out there provided by Verizon every year. It's called the Data Breach Investigations Report, and this is a report that, again, Verizon releases, has been releasing for the last 4 or 5 years or so, and they work in collaboration with many large organizations, many security organizations contribute to these types of reports, and they go into a lot of detail in analyzing what goes into an actual security breach itself. And so the image on the right there is kind of a visual image of all the different recent breaches just in the last couple of years. And the size of the bubble relates to just the number of records that were exfiltrated out of the organization. And so that could be personally identifiable information, as in the case of Target and Home Depot, or it could be just email records, as in the case of eBay. But these are all very large, notable attacks that you've heard of in the news. But the statistic that's quoted in the most recent 2015 Data Breach Investigations report from Verizon is that in 99.9% of the times of data breaches, that's 3 nines of data breaches, the exploit that caused that breach exploited a vulnerability that was more than a year old. That's a staggering statistic, right? When we know that in most cases, once a vulnerability is known, a patch is made available for it within at least 90 days, but typically 30 days of when a vulnerability is made public. So there's really no reason that a system should go unpatched for a full year. And when we look at what the bad guys are actually using to get into these large organizations, these are not, the latest 0-day that you're hearing in the news, or, the latest Java vulnerability. It's one that's been sitting on a shelf for a long time, where the bad guys are able to build this into an exploit kit. They're taking off-the-shelf software designed for these bad guys and exploiting these known vulnerabilities that have been patched for a long, long time. All right, so that's the end of my section around spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But it really is, it's important, absolutely important, to make sure you've got a complete patch and remediation process in your environment. So I want to talk a little bit about just some minor gaps. And of course, System Center Configuration Manager, it's a well-established tool. It's a great solution for client management in the organization. When it comes to this patch and remediation solution, again, System Center does a great job when it's working and configured with WSUS to provide all of the Microsoft updates. And so again, the capabilities there for Windows machines, OS deployment, software packaging, Microsoft updates. And I want to highlight too that it's really great that Microsoft provides the System Center Updates Publisher, or SCUP, to be able to provide a utility for administrators to create their own custom updates for their environment. It's a powerful tool, and it's one that all administrators should be aware of and should be doing some investigation around to make sure that they can include updates for their own personal line of business applications, and it's a way for at least to start to address the issue of patching the third-party applications in their environment. As powerful as that tool is, though, it doesn't have a lot of publicly available catalogs. So a few exceptions would be like Dell and HP provide some drivers. Adobe actually provides a catalog for some of its applications, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Also, patching via SCUP is a very manual process. So from what I've heard from our customers, administrators that use SCCM, they want to stay in SCCM, right? They've got their processes established. They want to do all their deployments through SCCM. Once they're in SCCM, they don't want to have to go out to another tool to be able to patch their environments. And then finally, yeah, and again, if you're using SCUP and you are using just a standalone catalog, you have to exit SCCM. You need to download that catalog. You need to know that a new catalog is available. There needs to be some kind of alerting notification mechanism that a new update is available in that catalog for even to give you a reason to go out and download it. Then you need to open up SCUP, do the full import of the catalog, choose which updates you want to publish from SCUP, exit out of SCUP, go into System Center, do a couple of synchronizations, make sure you've got, if there are any new vendors that have been added or new products you want to make sure are patched, you need to go and add those products into SCCM. So it's a bit of a manual process. And then finally, that's the System Center Updates Publisher is a great utility, and as we see with any powerful utility, there's a bit of a learning curve in trying to understand what it takes to actually build those detection mechanisms or the applicability checks or add in the correct installable and installed rules into that update. So, and that's time that we've heard anywhere from, could be 4 to 6 hours just to build a single update. It's time that IT system administrators just don't have, right? Again, I think from an overall management perspective, patch is still viewed as a solved problem. So why are you saying that you need to spend an extra 4 to 6 hours to deploy this this latest Adobe zero-day update? And that's just on the Windows side, right? Microsoft has great Windows coverage when it comes to being able to provide those updates for those Windows devices. When it comes to non-Windows platforms in your data center, specifically Linux, Unix, and Mac, there's a native client for System Center that's been released since 2012 SP1, which is a huge step forward in System Center to provide some visibility into some non-Windows platforms. And again, that client provides some robust hardware and software inventory, provides the ability to deploy a software package, and then also to deploy scripts out to those endpoints. Biggest gap there, though, the drawback for that native client is no native patch assessment or remediation capabilities. There's no way to link that client out to, say, like a local Red Hat repo or another Unix repo, for example, to keep your Solaris machines or your CentOS data center machines up to date. So what can we do to fill those gaps? Well, I mentioned before, the first step you should be looking at is going into System Center on your Windows side and doing some deep software inspections to understand exactly what's even running in your environment. You can get that through some software inventory. but that's just to provide visibility of what's out there. That doesn't give you the actual visibility or the ability to proactively send out those deployments. So you really want to be looking for a comprehensive solution that can provide visibility across your entire environment from your Windows endpoints, all the third-party applications on your Windows endpoints, all the way through to the non-Windows Linux, Unix, and Mac platforms running in your environment. And one such solution is provided by Heat. We call Heat Patch Link for Microsoft System Center. And it's actually broken into two solution areas. One we call Heat Patch Link Data Center and the other Heat Patch Link Desktop. We have these broken up for a couple of reasons. One is on the data center side, we typically see the Linux and Unix, the non-Windows platforms come into play, as well as the fact that there's the technical limitation, as I said, the native client for System Center does not provide the detection and remediation component. But on the Windows side, we already know that Microsoft are experts in keeping updates out to Windows clients. So from a technology standpoint, and to leverage some of the existing technology Microsoft has for being able to provide third-party updates, we have a solution we call Desktop that's much more integrated on the desktop side to service the third-party applications on Windows machines. So on the data center side, it's a full extension integrated into System Center Configuration Manager, focused on patch management for non-Windows platforms, Linux, Unix, and Mac. Again, since Mac is truly Unix-based under the covers, our solution can also do the patching for Mac endpoints as well. And the main value there is, although we do provide the ability to do full patch deployments for those non-Windows platforms through SCCM with this extension, there sometimes exists a difference in ownership in the organization on the administration side to who's actually going to be updating those platforms. And sometimes there is a designated Linux Unix administrator who's different from the Windows administrator, and the Linux Unix administrator doesn't necessarily want the Windows administrator making changes to their Linux Unix environment. That's okay. So the solution that we have also through System Center is full patch compliance reporting for those non-Windows platforms in that single pane of glass. So the Windows administrator, if they're through role-based access controls, it's not a bad idea to, if they're not able to actually make updates to those Linux platforms, they can at least provide reporting back to the Linux administrator to say, hey, we're all in this together. We need to all pass this compliance requirement. So here's the report itself that I'm going to send up to the management team, and you can see it's got a list of all the Windows updates that I've deployed, as well as a list of all of the non-Windows platform updates that that you need to deploy in order to keep our systems up to date. So here's the report I'm going to send up to management, but why don't you take a look at this and let me know when you've actually deployed these updates, and I can rerun this report and show that we're fully patched and fully compliant. On the desktop side, again, for those Windows systems, we have a broad range of third-party Windows updates that we automatically synchronize to System Center Configuration Manager. And when we built this solution, we were really focused around a couple of core tenets. Number one, we wanted to be fully integrated. We didn't want to have any endpoint component. We wanted to fully leverage the Windows, the System Center client that's out there already on your Windows machines. And we wanted to make it as easy as possible. So we take kind of a set and forget, if I can borrow that from Ron Popeil, but if I take kind of a set and forget attitude when it comes to configuring this solution, where you can go in and configure which third-party applications you want to have managed by this solution, and then we will automatically download, publish, and synchronize those into System Center, and they'll just show up next to your other Windows updates. We also include what we call Patch Smart technology, and that's the marketing line there is, gets applications installed right the first time, and I'll get more into that in a couple slides, but something that we built as a response to what we were finding with all the other third-party vendors that are out there that really don't build installers nearly as well as Microsoft does. And then finally, again, as I mentioned, we really want to fully leverage the System Center infrastructure for scalability, to follow your existing SCCM workflows, have all those third-party Windows updates flow through to your existing SCCM compliance reports, etc. So to drill in a little bit more on the data center side, and I can flip over here to a demo here just to give you an idea of what this looks like too, but the whole idea is to have the Linux and Unix updates side by side within your SCCM console. So we've added a couple of nodes you'll see under the assets and compliance software library and all the way through the monitoring and administrative workspaces in System Center. And you'll see that show up today as the mentioned Patch Manager Data Center, and then as we migrate the branding, those will show up as Heat Patch Link. But you'll see the full list of all of your Linux, Unix updates displayed through System Center. Gives you visibility and control all from that single management console. And again, this can be installed on all of your remote management consoles. It's all going to talk to a single application server, and to provide you that visibility across your organization. Can give you a view of your any kind of security posture and reduce your risk through that. Can also provide some tools for automating those deployments, and then that last piece there, the extensible and customized scripting. As I mentioned, this Microsoft has System Center Updates Publisher, which is a very robust custom content creation utility for Windows, and we also provide what we call the Heat Content Wizard, which is essentially the analogous solution for the Linux and Unix and Mac platforms. So we're providing visibility to all the detection mechanisms you can use to then create custom updates for those non-Windows platforms. And again, in this solution we have support for all of the most prevalent Linux and Unix and Mac operating systems. I'm going to actually just flip over here real quick to the Alive SCCM environment. And just to show, here's the Patch Manager Data Center solution, and through software library, for example, if I look at this new node that's added here under Patch Manager Data Center, you can get a list of critical and not superseded updates. If I can look at just all of the updates for now, this will pull in a list of, oh, it looks like these are some Adobe updates, but actually these are the third-party application updates for Mac. Because again, it's important to make sure that not only are you applying the OS updates for Mac, but you're also applying the third-party application updates on your Macs as well. But if I look, for example, for a specific update for CentOS, this is going to give you more detail about this, and then I can, find out more information about what's listed here. Again, providing CVE information as well. If I actually wanted to look at Firefox, let's see if that brings up. That's going to bring in some security updates for Firefox. And then what's actually cool about this too is I can look at a specific CVE, because we know a lot of these updates address a single vulnerability, a single CVE. This is what's an identifier for a specific vulnerability. This can be applicable across platform. And so if I wanted to, say, view that update across platforms, see, I can see actually this vulnerability, the CVE 2006, it's an old vulnerability, is applicable across the board. So I see this applicable to CentOS machines, some SUSE Linux machines, Oracle Linux machines, Red Hat machines, again, because Firefox is a pervasive application across many different platforms. So this gives you a very widespread view across your organization. All right, getting back here for just a second. Now, when I look at the desktop side, again, our full solution here is based on automating those third-party application updates into System Center. So again, we're trying to make it as accessible. And this Managed Products screenshot here shows it's a list of applications themselves, or vendors, or you can drill in to see which applications are provided by that vendor or there's a separate drill down into those applications to see which actual versions you want to have managed. So if you want to only manage, say, Flash Player 18 in your environment, then we will only synchronize in the latest Flash Player 18 updates. That's kind of their extended support release, or ESR version from Adobe. So the very flexible tool. You can import a wide variety of third-party applications, or you can keep it simplified and only provide the updates for applications like your Javas and Adobes, for example. So very simple user experience, easy to pick up. This is just the configuration portion of it. All of the management portion still stays within System Center. So again, our goal was to stay as integrated as possible. And again, I can flip over and show you how that looks in this SCCM console. Or eliminating that full effort of building out those packages manually. So there's no need at all actually to go into SCUP to do any of this management. And then significantly reducing security risk, overall simplifying that compliance reporting. This is really taking that last piece for the Windows side that's the most targeted piece from a third-party application standpoint, and putting it into that patch management workflow that you already are using in SCCM. And so this becomes, the solved problem again. Definitely a wide variety of third-party application updates supported, and again, this is meant to be a bit of an eye chart here. And if there are any applications that you think should be managed through this solution, which you don't see on this list, feel free to drop that into the question pane and let me know, and we'll get to work on looking at those. You see definitely the most targeted and prevalent applications. You've got all the Adobes there. You've got Oracle, Java there. But then at the same time, if you're already using this solution to do software distribution or software updates, we actually heard the feedback from our customer base that, hey, this is so helpful. Then could you also provide a distribution mechanism for, say, Wireshark updates? And Wireshark may not be the most targeted third-party application, although there have been some vulnerabilities opened up against it, but it's a very useful utility when it comes to helping you do your job as the typical system administrator. So we provide that capability to then keep that application up to date as well, and so you can again provide those updates through the same workflow you're using to keep all of your other applications, your Microsoft applications, up to date. So this is just another quick view just based off of looking at those application icons. It might be easier to differentiate which of those applications are actually managed through this tool. One other point I want to make here too is that this is an area where through our history, from going all the way back from Lou mentioned security all the way back to the patchling days, we as Heat Software now have been building patch updates for a long time and have a fully staffed team that's dedicated just to monitoring all of these supported applications and platforms, all those non-Windows platforms as well, and building out these updates in a variety of methods depending on the vendor, and in keeping those updates up to date through a consistent update stream. And so it really is a full-time job, and it's one area that we continue to invest heavily in. So there's one question there: does this use the Shavlik service for update data? And no, this is all built and maintained in-house. There's Shavlik is essentially a competing service for a similar type of solution, and so this is a full, robust content creation team. And just to kind of give you some idea of why we're even doing this, there are a couple of streams that exist out there, but most notably, as I mentioned at the very beginning here too, Adobe actually provides their own catalog for some of their applications. It's not all of their applications, but for some of their applications. And so we actually took a look at that free Adobe catalog, opened it up in SCUP, and just to see if, hey, if we're going to provide a solution, do we even need to rebuild this stuff if there's a solution that's already coming from if there's already a solution out there provided by Adobe. And very quickly we realized that yes, we would definitely want to rebuild those updates provided by Adobe. And I see a couple of questions coming in, which is great. I'll get to those in just a minute. But first off, when we look at a single update for a specific application, and this is built two different ways. One is the one that's released from Adobe. The other is the one that we built, but it's the same update, this Acrobat update. We took a look at that, opened both of those up in SCUP, and this is really kind of just diving under the hood of what we mean when we say enterprise class content. So first and foremost, we look at the description data, and it's not really all that functional, but it's informative, right? And you want to understand as an administrator what's even in this update. And the Adobe update says it addresses some security vulnerabilities, and that's good. But we wanted to go ahead and actually provide a little bit more information than that. So you can see in that description, we're listing what the CVE is in the description and a description of what is that CVE actually does. But really where it's most important from an administrative perspective is when we get into this supersedence information. And this is incredibly important. If you were to use the Adobe catalog over and over again to continue to import and publish the latest Acrobat updates, Adobe is not providing any supersedence information in their updates. And that can be a real challenge if you have an endpoint that comes online that maybe hasn't been patched in a while, and it happens to have this application installed on it. You're going to show as required for all of the updates provided by Adobe all the way up into the latest. And that can seem like a daunting task, and it's actually going to end up consuming more bandwidth and more time as you create that deployment. But with accurate supersedence information, that's interpreted by SCCM. Again, we're using fully compliant SCCM content here, and it will automatically mark those older superseded updates as expired. And so this is really just streamlining your update process so that if that endpoint does come online, it has this older unpatched application on there, we're only going to show you the minimum number of updates you need to apply to bring that that endpoint fully patched. So very, very useful. Finally, from a security standpoint on this slide, there is even the CVE's identifiers are important enough that Microsoft actually has a field for them in System Center Updates Publisher. And so we go ahead and utilize that in case you wanted to provide some custom reports through SSRS to look for those. Most importantly, though, when it comes to building what we would call an enterprise class patch, it comes down to the way that you're building your detections and your applicability rules. So what are called in SCUP installable installed rules. And when we looked at what's being used by Adobe and their free updates, they're really just using the most generic detection method possible, and that's an automatically generated installable rule based off of a registry key that's set in the MSI, or in this case the MSP. And that's a quick way to do it, but in our experience, it's probably not the most robust way to create that detection. And so we actually, again, going all the way back to the PatchLink days, have patents written around what we call this fingerprint technology. And the fingerprint technology is all about creating the correct applicability and patched and not patched checks in the update. And we're looking beyond the registry. We're actually looking to see where that update itself is dropping the update, what files are changed on the endpoint, looking for those specific file version changes on the endpoint for that specific file, so we can say, is this update actually applicable to this endpoint before we say that it's required? And after you've done your deployment and it's had a chance to sit there and run, do we actually show correctly that it has been updated appropriately? And to, again, look for that file version that's been dropped by the MSI and say, yes, actually that is resident on the endpoint. Yes, then it's fully patched. So going beyond just the registry checks to corroborate file and registry settings, again, doing architecture checks as well, basic architecture checks, which becomes important on some updates, right? We see a lot of updates especially for Java, for example, where it's written specific for 32-bit or 64-bit. We want to make sure you're not going to be installing the incorrect update on an OS that can't support it. So a couple of questions that just came in, I'll answer real briefly here before I get to the last slide there in this section is, when patching Linux, does the Linux server require the native SCCM agent, or do you use your own agent that is installed on the Linux server? It's a little bit of both, actually, right? If you want to have all that robust hardware and software inventory through SCCM, then you'll need the SCCM client on that Linux machine. But as I mentioned earlier, that SCCM client does not provide the ability to do any detections. There isn't like a Windows Update user client that's applicable or that's available on Linux machines to run those detections. And so there is an agent component that is required for Linux, Unix, and Mac machines in order to fully use this solution. And then the metadata that's provided through the SCCM plugin that I showed in the last demo would be able to be read by that client on those Linux, Unix machines and then displayed back appropriately back through the SCCM console. The last question I see here is, what's the time delta between third-party releases and availability through your product? And that's an excellent question. It's one we hear all the time, and I hate to say this, but it's one of those where it depends, right? We put the highest priority on updates for the most targeted and prevalent applications and those updates that are security related. So if there's an update released by Oracle Java, for example, which there were just a batch of them released earlier this week, that's going to go to the highest level in our queue to be built and released as soon as possible. And we publicly say that we'll release that within 3 business days. Realistically, within the last 2 years, we've been able to turn those around within 24 hours. Now, again, there's a long list of updates that are in our queue, and that's why we state that it could be up to 3 business days, because if we get sacked with a whole list of updates for a number of third-party applications and they're all security and they're all targeted and there's all wild exploits out there, that list is going to grow pretty quickly, and we're going to be working around the clock to make sure we get all those up, created, tested, and deployed out to our cloud as soon as possible. So I mentioned earlier that I was going to talk a little bit about this stuff called what we call patch smart technology, and this is something that grew out of the when we were building out our catalog for third-party applications. And as we were expanding support for all these different third-party vendors, we found out pretty quickly that ISVs are very inconsistent with the way that they build an installer. And so we went ahead and we created what we call this patch smart technology to ensure a greater first-time patch installation success. So through our testing, when we were actually when we were bundling the third-party installers in these into these SCUP updates, we were finding that there was a high likelihood for a deployment failure. And when we started looking at some of these deployment failures, we would see things like, well, the application was running on the endpoint at the time of the deployment. And we're like, well, what can we do to really get around that? If people are going to be using Adobe Reader on their endpoints, and yet we still need to patch Adobe Reader to be fully patch compliant. And so we introduced this technology that can actually do kind of a pre-scan of the endpoint before the update is deployed. And we can look for things like, is the application running at the time of deployment? And if so, we can shut the application down, then run the updater. And so then run the update. And so it can actually increase the overall likelihood of a successful deployment. And we can also do some other things that are really smart, like being able to disable the auto updates for things like Adobe or for Java, right? Because these are applications that have their own auto update mechanisms. And if you're already using SCCM to keep your endpoints up to date, you really probably don't want other processes running in your environment to try and do the same thing. So in the case of Adobe too, which was really a company built by acquisition, to keep Adobe applications up to date on your endpoint, it really requires 5 different Adobe updaters. There's a different updater for Flash Player than there is for Shockwave, than there is for Reader, and there's another one for Illustrator and another one for other Creative Suite components. And so there's all these different Adobe updaters that could be running simultaneously on your environment. So we'll go ahead and we'll shut those down. At the same time, we can also do things like strip out some of the, say, the extended applications that some of the vendors try to install at the same time. So if you're trying to update Java, for example, you probably don't want to have the Ask toolbar installed. So we can actually remove that as part of the installation experience. And we provide all this information. These are available as command line arguments as part of the deployment package itself. And if we include any of these in that update, we actually make them visible in the description itself. And so if you don't agree with the choice that we've made to say close if running, or to or to turn off the automatic updates, you can go ahead and open that update within System Center Updates Publisher, and then change that command line argument, and then and save it as something else. So really powerful commands that we make available in our updates to be able to ensure a first-time deployment. And this is part of the reason why, the last few slides have all been called enterprise class. We've been building content for a long, long time. We want to make sure that these are the best possible updates to be able to be deployed in your enterprise environment. So the last slide I have is actually, I wanted to show just a quick, this is kind of a busy slide, and I'll call it a architecture slide. I hesitate to call it an architecture slide if it was built in PowerPoint, but a bit of a architecture slide. And in some cases in your environment, you may not be using a central administrative site or multiple primaries. Microsoft has done, and especially in the latest SCCM 2012, done a great job in providing the scalability for a single primary. So you likely are only going to have a single primary in your environment, which is fine. But in some solutions, they require you to install additional components on the console itself. And we're really trying to follow, as I mentioned from the very beginning with this desktop solution, trying to follow the Microsoft SCCM architecture as much as possible. And so we have a single installer that will drop the required components depending on where it's being installed. So it needs to be installed near the software update point to begin with, so it can coordinate with WSUS. Because again, we're publishing fully, WSUS compliant content that's published directly into the WSUS database. And so we want to make sure we've got that communication. We're using the WSUS API to do that into SCCM. And so we have a small server component that all this does is it handles that coordination of which applications you want to have patched, and then it provides that schedule of that time interval back to when you want to communicate with what we call our global subscription service. It's really our cloud API to distribute all of this metadata. And then for those updates themselves that you do have published, when you go to grab that package that's going to be deployed, it can go out to the vendor website for the third-party vendor to pull down that package. Now, if you run that same product installer on a single desktop machine that you're using to manage SCCM, for example, it's only going to drop what we call the plugin component onto that console. And that's so that we can have what we call a same view experience. So if you have multiple administrators, which many organizations do, that are going to a single SCCM primary, they all want to see the same set of configurations. You don't want to have a different set of configurations available to the second administrator than they would be from the first administrator. Also, you only want a single point of contact from your software update point outside to the outside world for managing those updates, right? And so you want all that communication handled directly with the server, and then any of the configurations themselves handled with the plugin. And so that's where we kind of have this breakdown and fully leveraging the SCCM architecture. So I'm going to flip over real quick in the last few minutes that I have just to show what this looks like. So under the administration, you can see there's a second workspace that's been, our second node that's been added in this workspace that we call Patch Manager Desktop, and that sits right alongside the Patch Manager Data Center, and that provides just a couple of configurations under what we call catalogs and settings. And in this case, as I mentioned, this is just a quick set and forget. So in this case, you can see just from this catalogs view under Patch Manager Desktop, I'm only right now subscribed to Oracle Java, Apple iTunes, Notepad++, a Flash Player, and an ImageBurn. And then here are the major versions. And then I also have what we call auto-subscribe turned on. And in this case, the feature we have that we call auto-subscribe, that's about when a new major version comes out. If you are set to auto-subscribe, we'll go ahead and publish that major version as well. So if the latest version of FlashBlur comes out and you want to migrate from Flash 18 to Flash 19, we'll go ahead and auto-publish Flash 19. But if you are set on staying just with Flash 18, you can turn auto-subscribe off, and you will only get the Flash 18 updates. So it provides some additional flexibility on how you want to have these updates subscribed to. From the Settings tab, you can see some of the synchronization schedule. We actually have this configured to match exactly the settings that you have within SCCM that configured to communicate with WSUS. These are our own synchronizations with our cloud, but we have it, the options mimic exactly the same types of configurations you have available to synchronize with WSUS. And then we give you some information about the environment. We're actually showing you where this what specific version this is for the server as well as the plugin, and to see, this could be installed in a different desktop. So if that was in a different location, we would show you the machine name there. In this case, I'm actually RDP'd directly into the server itself, and so it's the same. But most importantly, actually, when I go to the software library, you can see I've got the tab here for data center, but there's no new tab for desktop. That's because, again, all that configuration is done under the administration workspace, and there's some monitoring that can happen under the monitoring workspace. But when it comes to actually deploying the updates, you probably want to just stay in the All Software Updates tab. And we do provide a new view, what we call All Third-Party Software Update Bundles. It's really just based off of the All Software Updates, and we're limiting it just to non-Microsoft. But either way, it's exactly the same functionality. We're retaining the right-click functionality, and this is all native SCCM views. This is not really a part of the Lumention code base. But you can see, actually, if I go back to the All Software Updates view, I can actually add a vendor here, and then I can group by that vendor. And if I want to collapse all at this level, I can see all these different third-party updates that have been published into this environment. And if I drill into Oracle, for example, I can see some of the Oracle updates and gives more information about what those are, etc. So it gives you, again, this is all the native SCCM view. I could schedule a deployment straight from here if I wanted to, and it's going to bring up the full deployment workflow. These are all SCCM screens and SCCM configurations. And with that, I'm going to flip back to just the slides real quickly here. Any other final questions?
Thanks, Russ. I see you put the survey link on your slide there, and I just sent it to the entire audience in the chat box. So we ask that you take a couple of minutes to submit your feedback, as you have with the other presentations. You see the question there from Wilfred, Russ?
Yeah, so there's a question just came in that says, can you repeat the licensing for this? We actually have the licensing based on a per node basis, and so feel free to reach out to us and to our sales team, and we can, depending on the size of the organization, how many endpoints you're managing, or depending if you're going to do a multi-year contract or not, but it's per node basis. We offer both subscription and perpetual license options.
Great, thanks, Russ. Fantastic presentation, thank you very much. A lot of information there. We'll stick around for a few more minutes in case someone thinks of something else they'd like to ask you, Russ. And other than that, thanks for joining us. I will send out the slide decks of all the presentations, a link to the recording, and the questions and answers. So please stay tuned for that. We appreciate your attendance, and register for our next university event on December 3rd, which is OMS University Operations Management Suite. Thanks so much. Thank you, Russ.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.